She quickly followed suit and nodded. Hiding the dagger behind his back, he casually opened the door and strode inside, his eyes darting all around the room to make sure it was empty. He gestured for Rhaenys to follow him in, and the dragon let out what Aegon could only describe as a delighted cry. Smiling widely, Rhaenys pushed past him and rushed over to the small white dragon. "Meraxes," she murmured happily, pushing a hand through the bars. "I am so sorry that you've been stuck in that crate all this time. I promise, after this I will never lock you up again." The dragon, Meraxes, nuzzled her small head into Rhaenys' hand, a low growling in her throat that Aegon thought sounded a bit like purring. "Hate to break up this reunion, but we need to meet the others at the boat. Make sure she stays quiet or all of this has been for nothing. Did you hear that?" Rhaenys murmured, bending down until her brown eyes were level with the dragon's golden ones. "You need to stay quiet. Liquor, Meraxes." The dragon blinked up at her. "Was that Valyrian? Did she understand you?" Aegon asked curiously, momentarily forgetting the urgency of the situation. "No idea," Rhaenys responded breezily, shrugging a shoulder. "Let's find out." She put her dagger away and carefully picked up the crate with two hands. She had just started turning toward him when Aegon heard what sounded like footsteps approaching the cabin. He acted immediately and on instinct, striding 3 steps across the cabin, grabbing Rhaenys with one hand and pressing his dagger to her throat with the other. "What are you doing?" she hissed in fear and confusion, struggling against him. He ignored her, tightening his hold as the door was flung open and Red strode in. He stopped short when he saw them in his cabin, and his expression turned into that familiar anger. "What in the hells is going on here?" he demanded, his black eyes finding Aegon. "I caught her trying to steal the dragon," Captain Aegon responded, straightening his shoulders and carefully keeping his face blank so that he wouldn't give his lie away. "How did she get out?" he thundered, his dark eyes flashing and his voice deepening. Aegon forced away the childhood flashbacks of when Red used to take out his anger on him, not acknowledging the smallest of shivers that ran down his spine. "I don't know," Aegon lied again. "I was coming to you to find out our plans for the dragon tomorrow when I found her in here." The captain made an angry noise in the back of his throat, prying the dragon's crate from Rhaenys' hands and setting it back on the desk. "Oh, shut the fuck up," the captain snapped at the dragon's cry of displeasure. "I swear, I'll never be so happy to sell anything in my entire life. This fucking dragon doesn't ever shut up. I haven't slept in days." "That's because she doesn't belong with you," Rhaenys growled, struggling against Aegon once more so fiercely that the point of his dagger dug into her neck slightly, drawing blood. Aegon inwardly cursed, trying to hold on to her and not slit her throat at the same time. Red took a step forward, backhanding her across the face and making her head snap to the side. Anger filtered through Aegon as he watched her wipe the blood off her lip with the back of her hand. "The dragon does not belong to you either, not anymore. The sooner you accept that, the sooner you will adjust to your new life as a slave." "Never," Rhaenys vowed. A slow, empty grin spread across Red's face, one that was even more terrifying than his anger. "Perhaps I'll just kill you," he declared with a shrug, slowly pulling his sword free. "With the dragon, the other prisoners and all the goods we won, the amount I would get for you is hardly worth the trouble you cause. How would you like to die?" "Decapitation?" he asked softly, seeming to savor the moment as his sword flicked up with her neck. Aegon felt Rhaenys freeze against him and he clenched his teeth. A clean stab through the heart. The sword point moved down to her chest. "Or how about through the stomach?" "No," she breathed, shrinking back against him as the sword moved down to point at her stomach. "Please," she whispered, her voice twisted with fear. A hand covered her stomach protectively and he could feel her trembling against him. It was such an abrupt change from the aggressive defiance that she was just showing that Aegon frowned at the back of her head in bewilderment. And then he remembered Rhaenys telling him that she was with child. At the time, he had assumed she was saying anything she could to save herself and her friends, but the fear that he could feel coming off her body was real. Red's grin only widened at the terror on her face and Aegon instinctively felt his body tense, his heart rate picking up at the look on his captain's face. He could feel the situation building and knew that something was going to happen soon. He felt like his very soul was being torn in two. Red had given him food when he was starving and a place to live. He had taught him how to fight and survive in a cruel and unfair world. Red had saved his life and he owed him so much. On the other hand there was Rhaenys, the sister that he had thought was dead, and apparently an unborn niece or nephew. They represented the family that he had never gotten the chance to know and a whole different set of responsibilities that he wanted no part of. His life was simple. Sure, there were hard days at sea when their hunt took longer than expected, but those were also days where he got to enjoy being out on the open waters drinking with his men. There were women with no ties when they made port and the thrill of the adventure when they set their sights on an unsuspecting ship. Family. Family was messy. A slow and painful death it is, Red promised. He brought his sword back and made to stab her stomach, but Aegon found himself instinctively pushing Rhaenys out of harm's way, his dagger clashing with Red's sword to halt its progress. Shock filtered through Red's expression, his black eyes widening. "What do you think you're doing?" "I don't know," Aegon's mind responded as he used Red's shock to his advantage, shoving his sword arm to the side and raising a leg to kick him in the chest. Red stumbled back several steps before he caught his balance. "I've given you everything," he thundered in his deep voice, black eyes flashing. He drew himself up to his fullest height, his imposing presence seeming to fill the entire cabin. "I fed you. I clothed you. I taught you everything I know and trusted you as my second in command. And now you think you can betray me, boy?" He laughed, a deep, unamused laugh. "You'll die for this. You always did talk too much," Aegon smirked, taunting him. With a roar that seemed to shake the room, Red rushed at him, sword raised. Aegon moved quickly, pulling his own sword out of his sheath in time for their blades to connect. He was dimly aware of Rhaenys scrambling out of the way as the sound of steel clashing filled the cabin, their swords flashing quickly. Red came at him with the brute strength that he was known for, and Aegon cursed, gritting his teeth. The cabin was small and cramped and he was finding it difficult to fully swing his sword. He managed to block the first 3 blows, duck under the 4th, but when he went to sidestep the 5th thrust, he slammed his leg into the desk, rattling the dragon's crate and making her shriek. Red grinned as he drew first blood, his sword slicing Aegon's left bicep and making him hiss in pain. The burning of his arm and the feeling of the warm blood flowing freely only increased his anger and his drive to win. He surprised Red by lunging forward and going on the offensive. He constantly changed his moves, teeth bared. He swung at his head, thrust at his chest, faked a blow with the sword and successfully stabbed his side with the dagger. Red roared with pain and Aegon was forced to release the dagger and skip backwards as he swung wildly at him. Red pulled the dagger out with a grunt, and sent it flying towards him. Aegon quickly ducked and before he knew it Red was standing in front of him, knocking his sword out of his hand and grabbing his throat. He choked and gasped for breath, eyes wide as he stared up at his captain's still grinning face. Out of the corner of his eye he saw Red pull back his sword arm and he desperately grabbed his wrist to stop the blade from impaling him. He was using all his strength, but with the lack of oxygen filtering into his body, both he and Red knew he was fighting a losing battle. "No!" Rhaenys cried in despair. She launched herself at Red, plunging her own daggers into his back. Aegon used Red's scream to his advantage, wrenching his sword arm to the side and sending him staggering back. Coughing and greedily gasping for air, Aegon crouched low to the floor, the world coming back into focus. He scrambled for his own sword as Red shoved Rhaenys off him, sending her crashing into the wall. Red staggered again and swayed, bracing himself against the desk. He collapsed to his knees as Aegon rose to his feet, his eyes noticing the blood soaking through his shirt from the 3 stabs wounds they had inflicted. Panting, his eyes filled with pain, he looked up at Aegon. "Why?" he growled in a voice tinged with agony, anger and confusion. "Because," Aegon began, walking towards him, sword in hand. He shoved away any guilt, hardening his heart to do what needed to be done. "She's my sister." And with that, he thrust his sword through his captain's heart. He watched as the light faded from his eyes, a gurgling sound escaping from his throat as he collapsed back on the floor and took his last breath. Aegon. Blinking, he looked down to see Rhaenys Lily touching his arm, looking up at him with concern. "Are you all right?" "Fine," he answered, dimly realizing how empty and wooden his voice sounded. He knew Rhaenys didn't quite believe him, but she didn't press any further. With a hard look on her face, she pulled her daggers from Red's back, cleaning them off before slipping them back in the holster in her belt. She retrieved Egon's dagger and he mechanically followed suit while she picked up the dragon's crate. "Come on, we need to go," she murmured softly, grabbing his hand and gently pulling him to the door. When he resisted and stayed where he was, she turned to him with a stern look on her face. "Look at me, Egon." Frowning, unable to think properly, he did as she asked. "You have just killed your captain. I'm sorry for your loss, I really am. I know how much he must have meant to you. But there's no way you can stay now, your crew will kill you for this. You have to come with us." "I can't, You're my brother and I am not letting you die." Egon recognized the familiar, stubborn look in her eyes and realized that she wasn't going to give up. His eyes found Red's body again and deep down he knew that his life as a pirate was over. He may be hesitant to go with Rhaenys but he definitely didn't want to die for his betrayal. A sigh of relief left her when he finally nodded and she smiled up at him, taking his hand once more. He let her lead him out of the cabin and once they were outside they broke into a run. A glance up at the quarterdeck showed the helmsman's body lying on the floor, so at least that part of the plan had gone off without a hitch. They approached the part of the ship where the rowboat was prepared and saw Demon and the Summer Islander woman waiting. "Rhaenys," Demon called, the tension practically leaving his body at the sight of her. "Thank the gods." His blooded sword was still in his hand, but he was careful as he pulled Rhaenys into quick hug. "And Mera." He stuck his fingers into the bars of the dragon's crate and grinned when she half-heartedly nipped at him. "It's good to see you too," he chuckled, pulling his fingers to safety. "Come on." We lowered the boat into the water and Daisy took the others down already, they're waiting for us. "What is he doing here?" the woman snapped. In one fluid movement she notched and drew her golden bow and aimed it at Egon. "He's a pirate, he's not coming with us." "Stop," Rhaenys hastily said, quickly stepping between himself and the arrow. Everybody froze and the tension between the four of them increased tenfold. The dragon shuffled her wings restlessly, snaking her head forward at the potential threat and letting out a warning hiss. "You can't kill him, he's helping us escape." "He killed people I care about, people that I thought of as family," the woman snapped, hatred etched across her face. "His captain killed my father. Captain Hornigold is dead." Rhaenys interrupted heatedly, effectively shutting her up. "Egon just killed him to save me and help us escape." "Please, Jantara," she murmured softly. Egon stared at the back of her head, surprised by the amount of emotion in her voice. She barely knew him. Why was she continually risking her life for him? "He's my brother. I can't lose him. Not again." Jantara's eyes narrowed at her and for a long moment Egon thought she was going to release the arrow anyway. Still glaring furiously, she reluctantly lowered her bow. "Fine. But if I sense even one hint of a betrayal from him, I'm going to kill him." Agreed. Rhaenys nodded, sending Egon a pointed look over her shoulder that clearly told him not to cause any trouble. "Now, let's get out of here before we're caught." Rhaenys and Jantara carefully but quickly climbed down the rope ladder over the side of the ship to the rowboat gently bobbing on the water. Egon and Demon tied another rope to the dragon's crate and slowly lowered her down to Rhaenys. When Egon made to follow them, however, Demon gripped his arm tightly. When he looked over at the other man, he found himself staring into a pair of hardened blue eyes. "I know you're supposedly her brother, but if you do anything to hurt Rhaenys or endanger her life, Jantara's not the only one that you're going to have to worry about. Understand?" "Perfectly," Egon answered with a smirk, ripping his arm out of Demon's grip and climbing down the ladder. When he reached the bottom, he squeezed himself next to his sister who was currently being pulled into a tight hug by Daisy. "Oh, Your Grace, I'm so glad you're safe." "I'm all right," Daisy Rhaenys answered patiently, patting her on the back. "But I would be dead if it weren't for Egon. He saved my life." Daisy pulled back, sending him a wide smile. "Thank you." "Right," Egon responded slowly, feeling uncomfortable. Raising an eyebrow, he turned to Rhaenys. "Your Grace?" he repeated questioningly. "Did I forget to mention that I'm a queen back in Westeros?" Rhaenys answered breezily, shrugging a shoulder. "A queen?" he repeated again, feeling completely bewildered. "How?" "Well, I suppose technically Rhaenys Targaryen is dead," she amended, waving a hand. It was Malia Martell that became a queen, the name I had taken when I was brought to Dawn. Although, now she's supposedly dead too, she finished, looking slightly confused with the logistics herself. I don't understand, Egon confessed, shaking his head. Don't worry, we have time to get to know each other now, Rhaenys smiled, patting his hand. She looked up as Demon made his way down the ladder and yelped, gripping the boat when Demon's weight sent it rocking. He sent Egon another long look and moved behind them, picking up a pair of oars and beginning to row them away from the ship. Egon watched as the ship that had been his home for the past 7 years faded into the night. So many different emotions were filtering through him, tearing him apart on the inside. This wasn't what he had planned, this wasn't what was supposed to happen. It was true that Red was a hard, unforgiving man, but he was also the closest thing to a father that Egon had. Now he was dead and the blood was on his hands. He glanced over across the boat. Jantara was still glaring at him distrustfully, but she didn't break his gaze when he caught her. The other crew members were huddled together, keeping wary eyes on him and the dragon. There you go, Meraxes, he heard Rhaenys mutter, looking over to see her opening the crate. The small white dragon practically fled the cage with an exultant cry, making the crew members jump and gasp. Rhaenys laughed lightly when she eagerly climbed up her arm to perch on her shoulder, stretching her wings to her full capacity. That's better, isn't it? How far is Lies? Demon asked from behind them. Keep going in this direction and we should reach it by morning. Before that, with some help, Egon answered, reaching under the seats and pulling out 2 more pair of oars. Jantara held out her hand for a pair of oars. This will help stop me from killing you, she explained in a short voice, and Egon nodded, giving her 1 pair while he took the other. Meraxes, Rhaenys said in a confused voice as the dragon began beating her wings up and down, clipping the side of his head with one. They all watched with awe as the dragon took flight for the first time. Her wings weren't entirely steady at first and she wobbled more than once, making Rhaenys tense. Oh, she breathed, her eyes following her dragon as she gained more confidence and began to soar around, letting out a happy shriek. Egon noticed a tear slipping down her cheek even though her smile was widening. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How can so many bad things happen in a world where something so beautiful and amazing as this happens? There was no answer to that question and she knew it. I hate to end this beautiful moment, but what is your plan exactly? Egon questioned, his eyes still on Meraxes. How many people other than the one sitting in this boat have seen a real dragonfly? How are we finding this aunt of ours when we reach Lies? I suppose we'll need to find another ship. Rhaenys frowned, glancing over at Jantara. Any chance you'd be able to help us out with this? She asked hopefully. Jantara stared at her for a long moment while she rowed, debating. Only because you helped us escape, she finally responded. There's a Lyseni captain that owes my father and I a favor. But she said quickly, interrupting the grateful look that was beginning to spread across Rhaenys' face. Only if there's full disclosure. You must tell him about the dragon and who you are, and even then he still has the right to refuse to allow you on his ship. I understand, Rhaenys answered, nodding solemnly. Thank you, Jantara. You know, you are more than welcome to come with. No, Jantara said quickly, looking slightly apologetic as Rhaenys blinked in surprise. Thank you for the offer. But my people and I need to go home. We have families to inform of the death of their loved ones. Of course, Rhaenys said, bowing her head slightly. One of Jantara's crew members pulled her into a conversation and Rhaenys used the distraction to look up at Meraxes again. Rhaenys, are you all right? Daisy asked, frowning at the strange look on her queen's face. Something amazing came out of being captured by pirates. Rhaenys smiled, looking over at Egon. He shifted uncomfortably at the happiness shining from her eyes as another tear slipped from her cheek. She was accepting the fact that they were siblings much easier than he was. Meraxes has learned how to fly. I've learned that I'm with child, and I found my baby brother, she murmured, clasping her hand in his. And now I'm once again on my way to find my aunt. I'm putting my family back together, Daisy. There are few things that feel better than this. Chapter 28, Meereen. Rhaenys couldn't remember ever feeling like this in her entire life. No more secrets pressing against her chest and making it difficult to breathe. No more guilt coursing through her veins and twisting her insides. She stood at the bow of the ship with her eyes closed, enjoying the feel of the salty wind against her face and the sturdy wood beneath her hands. She felt light and happy and free. Rob's smiling face appeared in her mind's eye, causing the happy bubble in her chest to pop, wither and turn to lead in her stomach. While shedding the weight of her fake persona may have given her this general sense of freedom, she didn't feel quite whole. The cause was obvious: she had left her heart behind with her husband. A familiar cry disrupted her peace and her brown eyes opened, spotting her white dragon flying high in the sky, almost blending in with the clouds. Gasps and exclamations of awe echoed around her as Meraxes effortless flipped and spun through the air before folding her wings against her body and diving down into the water. A small smile crossed Rhaenys' face as Meraxes resurfaced, dripping water droplets as her wings fought to regain altitude. "You are just loving all this attention, aren't you?" Rhaenys murmured as Meraxes flew over to her and perched on the railing. "My fierce little dragon, a big show-off. You would think that they haven't seen her do that almost every day since we left Lies," Daisy said in a disgruntled voice, coming up next to her and resting her elbows on the railings of the ship. Rhaenys ran 2 fingers down the scales on Meraxes' back, taking care of the spikes. She settled back on her haunches, stretching her neck out towards the sun. Rhaenys had kept her promise to her dragon. When they reached Lies, she destroyed the crate so Meraxes would never have to be locked up again. Since then, she had been trying to strengthen the bond between them. She wanted Meraxes to fully comprehend her no matter what she said, so she found herself talking to the dragon in both the common tongue and High Valyrian. She talked about everything: her thoughts and feelings, her family, different objects around them, whatever she could think of. In addition, she recalled a lesson about trust that Oberyn had taught her many years ago when she first learned how to ride a horse. It was a long time before Oberyn let her actually get on the horse. They did several trust exercises, first brushing the horse's coat and then slowly running her hands along its body until it was comfortable in her presence. Rhaenys did the same exercise with Meraxes, and now, at this point in the journey, she was able to run her fingers down her spine from her head to her tail and even over her outstretched wings. "Go easy on Jantara's friends," Rhaenys said, chuckling lightly. "We should just be grateful that they're reacting with amazement instead of fear. The captain told me that he felt blessed to be able to have a dragon aboard his ship. Once he learned that she wasn't able to breathe fire yet," she added with amusement. "Though that didn't stop him from having gallons of seawater stored on board just in case." "I know," Daisy sighed, running a hand over her face. "I suppose I'm just growing tired of constantly being on these ships. I'd give anything to have 2 feet on solid ground again." She watched Meraxes as she bathed in the sun, her golden eyes half-lidded and a rumbling sound coming from her chest as Rhaenys found a spot just under her jaw. "She grows bigger every day," she commented, changing the subject. "She's about the size of a small dog now, wouldn't you say?" Rhaenys asked, feeling proud. "She's like a different dragon when she's not stuck in that crate." "She's been happier since we escaped that pirate ship," Daisy agreed, sending her a sidelong glance. "You both have." Rhaenys nodded, a small smile on her face. "I feel like I'm finally learning who I am now that I'm putting my family back together. I have my dragon back and Rob's child is growing inside me. It's all perfect except for your surly, smirking asshole of a brother," Daisy finished, shrugging slightly at Rhaenys' raised eyebrow. "Sorry." "No, you're right," Rhaenys sighed, pulling her hand back as Meraxes stood and stretched out her wings before leaping off the railing and flying off into the setting sun once more. "Aegon didn't want to come with us. When he killed the captain he wasn't left with much of a choice." What if she hesitated, feeling uncertain and out of her depth? What if he resents me for what happened? He killed the man who basically raised him in order to save me, someone that he doesn't even know. I take it your attempts to talk to him haven't gone so well. Rhaenys gave an unladylike snort and rolled her eyes. "Pretty horribly actually. I've tried so hard to get to know him in the weeks since we left Lies and he's resisted every attempt. I can't seem to break through to him and I don't know what else to do." A gust of wind blew her hair across her face and she impatiently tucked it back behind her ear. "He's been up all hours of the night gambling and drinking with the crew, then sleeping it off all morning. Some days he won't even look at me, let alone talk to me. But I'm not his mother, I can't tell him what to do." Maybe you just have to give him some time, Daisy suggested gently, putting a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Imagine being secure in your future one moment and then the next moment not knowing what each day will bring. Rhaenys nodded, taking a deep, steadying breath. I feel like I've failed him, that his family has failed him. This isn't the life he was supposed to live. He's grown up without a mother or a father or any kind of role model besides an exiled knight and a pirate. He's never had a real home or real friends. Gods, I don't know if he even knows what it feels like to have somebody love him. She swallowed against the lump forming in her throat. Rhaenys? Daisy asked in concern, peering down at her face. Are you all right? No, Rhaenys muttered, flicking away the straight hair with impatient fingers. One minute I'm annoyed, the next I'm happy, then I cry for no reason. Half the time I can't tell if I'm hungry or nauseous. It's like I've lost control of my body, she groused, throwing up her hands. She saw Daisy's sympathetic and slightly pitying expression and she sighed yet again. I'm sorry. I don't mean to complain. Don't be silly, I don't think of it as complaining, it's more like venting, she kindly assured her. I understand that first and foremost you're my queen, but I've begun to feel as if we're also becoming friends. And friends can vent any time they like. Rhaenys looked up at Daisy, surprise flooding through her as warmth spread through her chest. I thank you, Daisy, Rhaenys stuttered, feeling incredibly touched. I don't have very many friends outside of my family, so your friendship, it really means a lot. Your Grace. Both Rhaenys and Daisy turned to see one of the crew standing behind them. He bowed respectfully before speaking. I hate to trouble you, but we thought you should know, it's your brother. Again. Rhaenys' facial expression didn't change, but on the inside her stomach swooped down to her toes. Thank you, Zorin. I know the way, Rhaenys murmured, sending him a small smile before turning back to look at Daisy. Can you find Daemon for me? I'm going to need his help. Of course, Daisy nodded, her eyes sympathetic. Let me know if there's anything else that you need. Rhaenys took a moment after Daisy jogged off, taking a deep breath and trying to prepare herself for what she knew was waiting for her below deck. It had been the same the last half a dozen times since they'd been on this ship. Every so often, Aegon's drinking and gambling would spiral out of control until he was either picking a fight with one of the crew or passing out in his own puddle of vomit. When she made her way down the stairs to the room where the crew members occasionally gathered, she found herself facing a mixture of both scenarios. Daemon either had already been present or had beaten her there, because when she walked in he had an arm wrapped Aegon's chest as her brother drunkenly struggled to reach a taller, bigger crew member who was smirking and counting coins in his hand. It was still early, thankfully, so there weren't as many men around as usual. Still, she saw the looks of amusement and heard the disapproving mutters echo around the room. Several mugs were strewn across the floor and something wooden was broken into pieces. Steeling herself, Rhaenys walked forward into the room, putting a hand on her brother's chest and trying to get his attention. Aegon. She said in what she hoped was a calming voice. Aegon, let's go. We'll get you back to the cabin so you can sleep this off. Don't touch me. His words were more of a slur than the snack that he probably meant, but Rhaenys still flinched back anyway. He always seemed to grow angrier when he saw her. She didn't know if she would ever get used to the look of rage reflecting out of his purple eyes. Let me go, he growled, fighting against Daemon as hard as he could in his current state. Daemon gritted his teeth as he struggled to keep his hold on Aegon, but it was only a moment before her brother suddenly bent over and emptied the contents of his stomach. Both Daemon and Rhaenys leapt back in the nick of time. We will clean that up, Rhaenys called over her shoulder to the disgruntled crew members as both she and Daemon caught Aegon before he fell over. Rhaenys gripped his wrist, pulling one of his arms around her shoulder as they half carried, half dragged him back to the cabin that they shared. Both she and Daemon easily fell into the routine that they had developed. Daemon deposited Aegon against the wall where there was already a pile of blankets waiting for him. They learned the hard way that putting him in one of the hammocks was a terrible decision. The last time they did that he nearly suffocated on his own vomit. Rhaenys brought over a clean bucket for him just as he rolled over with a groan and began heaving again. Go away, he moaned miserably, glaring up at her through a fringe of greasy silver blonde hair, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. I don't want you here. Do you want me to stay with him again? Daemon asked her quietly, moving to her side. Rhaenys shook her head, jaw set. I've tried to respect his wishes, but I can't keep leaving and running away. He needs to learn that I'm his sister, his family, and I'm not going anywhere no matter what he says to try and scare me away. Here, Demon murmured, handing her a clean shirt. I'll come back down and check on you shortly. Shout if you need anything, all right? Thanks, she answered, taking the shirt and mustering up a reassuring smile at the look of concern on his face. Aegon jerked violently at the sound of the door closing behind Demon, looking up with bleary eyes. His expression collapsed into another angry glare at the sight of her still standing there. I told you to leave, he growled, using the wall to help him sit up further. He tried to keep his narrowed eyes fixed on her, but that only made him more off balance. I'm not leaving, Aegon, she told him in a clear, calm voice. Here, let me help you put on a clean shirt, that one reeks of rum and sick. She moved closer to him, holding out the shirt, but he grimaced and shoved her back several steps. How many times do I have to tell you to leave me alone? He snarled, growing angrier as he struggled first to his knees and then to his feet. You're not my mother. I don't know you. Stop trying to protect me, just stop trying to take care of me. He yelled. He started towards her, stumbling heavily as the ship tilted and crashing into her. Rhaenys let out a startled yelp as her back hit the wall, Aegon somehow managing to brace his hands on either side of her head. I was doing fine on my own, I never needed a family. He roared, spittle flying in her face as she struggled not to flinch. I didn't want to come on this fucking journey, so why don't you do us both a favor and leave me the fuck alone? Rhaenys stared up at him as he breathed heavily, trying to ignore the putrid stench of his breath. You may not need or even want a family, but you have one now, Rhaenys told him firmly, her own eyes narrowing slightly in response to his expression. If there's one thing I learned in the past 9 and 10 years, it's that family is absolutely everything. There's no one that fights dirtier, it's true, but family, my family, shows up when you need them most. They stand behind you no matter what, and they love you even when you're at your lowest point. Blood cannot be denied, Aegon, she finished gently, putting a hand on his shoulder and hoping he understood her even through his drunken haze. So why don't you do us both a favor and accept the fact that I am your sister? I am not giving up on you. I am not going anywhere. They both glared at each other for a second. Aegon's nostrils flared just a moment before the fight seemed to drain out of his body. Stubborn, he muttered, stepping back and swaying dangerously. Apparently it runs in the family, Rhaenys grunted, catching him once more and guiding him back towards the blankets. He grumbled slightly but otherwise didn't protest much as she carefully helped him out of his soiled shirt and put on a new one. It took her several minutes and she was sweating at the end of it, but when she finished and sat down, she looked at her baby brother and her chest hurt. This was the only time he wasn't looking at her with anger or regret. He looked so innocent with his eyes closed, and she couldn't help reaching out to move his hair further out of his face. I'm going to prove to you how important family can be, she swore, whispering softly, her other hand unconsciously drifting to rest on her stomach. I won't fail you the way our father failed us. Dry, scratchy mouth, pounding head, a fuzzy memory, it was becoming an all too familiar way to wake up. He swiped a weary hand over his eyes, rubbing the crust from them as he attempted to blink them open. Fuck, he swore under his breath, the taste in his mouth absolutely horrid. And what was that smell? Was that him? He tried to piece together the events from the night before, but he could only remember brief flashes. The pain from a fist splitting his lip, getting violently sick yet again, and Rhaenys groaning again and wishing that he had ate something before he started drinking last night. He forced himself to roll over and sit up. His bleary gaze landed on a tall figure standing against the opposite wall, staring down at him. Aegon belatedly recognized Demon from the disapproving and slightly pissed expression that crossed his face every time he looked at him. He looked away, searching, but Demon answered his unasked question. She's not here, he told him, crossing his arms. She was up most of the night making sure you didn't choke on your own vomit. I only convinced her to leave about an hour or so ago. She's gone to apologize to the captain yet again on your behalf. Guilt trickled through him and he found that he couldn't hold Demon's cold gaze. Here. Demon tossed him a biscuit, but Aegon's reactions were incredibly slow and he fumbled with it. She insisted that I make sure you eat. You don't like me much, do you? Egon asked. Even in his current state, his first instinctual defensive strategy was his amused smirk. Not only was it an effective mask to cover what he was really feeling, but it always served to get under people's skin. Demon was a perfect example. At the sight of the smirk on Egon's face, Demon's eyes narrowed into infuriated slits. Not even a little, he answered bluntly. My prince, your uncle, charged me with Rhaenys' safety and well-being. Since finding you, she's been worried about your behavior and stressed by both your words and actions. She hasn't been sleeping either, and in case you've forgotten, she's carrying the heir to the Northern Throne. It isn't healthy. Egon took a bite of the slightly hardened biscuit, shaking his head. I never asked her. Yeah, Demon interrupted, waving his hand dismissively. That's the thing about Rhaenys. You never have to ask. His jaw worked for a moment, debating about whether he should continue on. I grew up with her, so I know how important family is to her. She used to cover for her sister Arianne when she would sneak out to meet me. The two of them practically raised little Tristan in the absence of his mother. She would fight and argue with literally anybody who disrespected her bastard sand snake cousins, most of whom could defeat an experienced soldier. Once Rhaenys considers you part of her family, there's pretty much nothing that she wouldn't do for you. Demon's eyes blazed into him. I personally don't think you're worth the trouble. Egon's fist closed tightly around the biscuit, heat and irritation flooding through him. You know nothing about me. You're right, Demon conceded, nodding. All I know is what I've seen since we left that pirate ship. The only decent thing you've done since we met you is save her from your captain. Egon wasn't able to hide his reaction at the casual mention of Red. His whole body practically twitched and he knew the other man saw it. Look, we all understand that you would have rather have continued your life as a pirate. For reasons that are beyond my understanding, he added under his breath. But just because you're traveling with us for the time being doesn't mean you have to act like a complete asshole. Give her a chance. I promise you she's worth it. With that last pearl of wisdom and another long look, Demon left the cabin. Egon let his forced smirk drop as soon as the door shut, taking a savage bite of the biscuit. He was a fucking pirate. He wasn't a brother or a nephew, he knew nothing about family or friendship. But he couldn't shake the guilt he felt for the way he had behaved towards Rhaenys. He may have a hard time accepting that she was his sister, but he didn't wish to cause her any stress or pain. He resisted the urge to punch the wall in frustration when he realized what he had to do next. Grumbling under his breath, he finished his biscuit and went off in search of a bucket of seawater. He washed his face and then ended up dunking his entire head in the water in the hopes that it would help clear his mind and mask the smell. He went off in search of his sister and found her where he knew she would be above deck in the open air with her dragon by her side. A flash from last night surfaced in the forefront of his mind as he stood there observing her, oblivious to the hustle and bustle of the crew members rushing around him. I am your sister. I am not giving up on you. I am not going anywhere. Rhaenys looked around at his approaching footsteps and smiled brightly at the sight of him. Morning, she greeted, making an effort to sound cheery. I just spoke with the captain and he said we should reach Astapor in about a day's time. It will. I'm sorry, Egon blurted, forcing himself to say it before his long-absent conscience decided to disappear again. Rhaenys froze mid-sentence, surprise flickering in her brown eyes. I don't remember everything that happened last night, but you didn't deserve to be treated that way. He moved closer to her, resting his elbows against the railing. Meraxes stretched her neck out towards him, letting out a small cry in greeting as he ran a hand down her scales. I feel lost, he admitted, trying to explain his actions. It's been a long time since I've felt this way and it brings up a lot of painful memories. She stayed silent, both of them looking out to sea as he struggled to find the words. None of this excuses what I did, but I'd put Aegon Targaryen behind me. I hadn't thought about our parents, or you, in years. And now, here you are. Raised by our uncles, surrounded by family, married with a baby in your belly and a queen. I lost my guardian when I was 10. I've been beaten, starved, homeless, and that was all before I joined Red's crew. I've stolen, lied, killed, done whatever was necessary to get what I want. We have nothing in common. I understand where you're coming from. Rhaenys nodded slowly, a thoughtful frown on her face. We've had very different childhoods. But I don't know if that necessarily means we don't have anything in common. We know what it's like to experience anger, sadness, pain. She peeked up at him, then focused back on the dragon in front of her. We both know what it's like to have our parents ripped away from us. We know what it's like to grow up without our family, to have to hide who we really are from the rest of the world. The life or death secrets, Aegon added darkly, catching her gaze once more. The never-ending lies. Yes, she murmured, her voice tight with rage. Meraxes let out a loud cry in response, snaking her neck forward, and Rhaenys blinked, soothing her by running a hand down her spine. My entire life was built on lies and secrets. They kept growing and getting heavier, and I was too afraid to tell the people that I loved most. She took a deep breath and turned to face him. I ended up hurting the point where I've broken the relationship we had, and I don't know if they'll ever forgive me. Aegon heard so many familiar emotions in her voice. He heard the unbearable pain, the utter self-loathing, the fear. He shifted on his feet, feeling awkwardness settle over him. His hand twitched as if to comfort her, but he quickly clenched it into a fist. It seems our lives are intertwined by darkness, he responded in a forced, light voice. No more, Rhaenys swore firmly, brown eyes blazing. My life will not be ruled by lies or secrets. I'm starting over. I'm going by my real name. I'm unexpectedly putting my Targaryen family back together. She gave him a brief smile. And I'm figuring out who I really am. Aegon didn't have that problem. He knew who and what he was. He paused for a moment as Meraxes chose that moment to take flight, his eyes following her as she soared through the air. What do you want, Rhaenys? He asked her, voicing a question that he had been wondering about for some time. What are you hoping to get out of all this? Ideally. I'd like to meet she corrected quickly. Aunt Daenerys. She has 3 dragons of her own, all of which hatched before Meraxes. They should be bigger, stronger, faster. I'm hoping she'll help teach me how to train Meraxes. I'm hoping that she'll be a kind and decent person, someone who we can recruit to help us to our cause. A doubtful expression crossed Aegon's face. From what you've told me, her brother has died, so as far as knows she is the last Targaryen. She has 3 dragons. What if she wants the Iron Throne for herself? Rhaegar Targaryen was her brother, but he was our father. Both you and I have a better claim to the throne than she does. How do you think she's going to react when we show up on her doorstep? I don't want the Iron Throne, Rhaenys told him honestly, shaking her head. My husband is king in the north and I only want to be his queen, if he'll still have me, she added under her breath. She peeked up at him. Do you want the Iron Throne? She asked, sounding as if the thought had never occurred to her before. The throne is rightfully yours. He swallowed his automatic denial and snarky remark and took a moment to think about it, looking out over the water. He hadn't thought about becoming king for so many years. He tried to picture himself now, the pirate version of himself, with all the things that he had done, sitting on the throne. He tried to picture himself clean, stuffed into fancy clothes and forced to listen to and deal with all the problems of Westeros. He wouldn't be able to travel, feel the wind in his hair, the excitement running through his veins as he begins his next new adventure. While he might have been raised and groomed to become king in the beginning, it was certainly not something that he wanted anymore. No, he said finally. No, I don't want the throne. Rhaenys nodded, the expression on her face thoughtful as she watched him. Then we convince her that we don't want the throne. If she turns out to be the type of person that we can see ruling Westeros, then we offer to support her claim to the throne. And me? What do you want from me? I don't want anything from you, Aegon, she correctly him softly with a sad smile. I'd like to get to know the little brother that I thought was dead. But if at the end of our journey you still don't want any part of me or of having a family, then we'll go our separate ways. I don't want you to be unhappy, Aegon. I want you to have the life that you want, and if that means without me, then that's something I'm just going to have to accept. Aegon didn't have to look at her to know how much it pained her to say those words. He could hear it very clearly in her voice. A small knot of tension loosened in his chest, and it was a moment before he recognized it as relief. He couldn't ever go back to being a pirate, Of course, not once word got out of what he did to Red, but at least Egon had the option to leave if he didn't want to travel with Rhaenys any longer. Deal. Egon nodded, turning to face her. He held out his hand and she slowly reached out to take it with that sad smile still on her face. Pardon me, Your Grace. They both turned to see Daemon standing behind them, 2 swords in his hand. Catch. Rhaenys instinctually caught the sword that Daemon tossed to her, looking from it back to him with a confused frown. What's this for? I thought we could spar for a bit. We don't want you getting rusty. Rhaenys didn't notice how far away from her body she was holding the sword or the fact that she was shaking her head. I'm not in the mood to spar, Daemon. That's what you've said every other time I've asked you, he replied, twirling his sword. His sky-blue eyes had an oddly determined gleam to them. The girl I knew from Dawn would never have turned down an opportunity to spar. I'm a different person from the girl you knew in Dawn. Oh, don't give me that bullshit, he cut in, now beginning to circle around her. Frustration and annoyance were now beginning to swirl within her. Couldn't he take a hint? Fighting is in your blood just as it is in mine. Enough, Daemon. Your back is healed. We have nothing better to do to pass the time and I need a bigger challenge than Daisy. Egon tried to step in on her behalf. Listen, if she says she doesn't want to. Daemon shot him a quick glare, pointing his sword in his direction. Stay out of this. It doesn't concern you. Daemon's circles grew smaller and Rhaenys felt her palms begin to grow sweaty, her chest growing tight as she spun to keep him in her sights. Daemon, she warned. Come on, Your Grace, where is the famous warrior Princess of Dawn? What would Prince Oberyn say if he saw you now? I said, enough. Rhaenys yelled furiously, throwing down her sword so hard that it clattered loudly on the deck of the ship. Listen to me, Daemon Sand. No, you listen to me, Rhaenys Targaryen. He threw down his own sword and stalked closer to her, getting in her face. Every time a blade has touched your hand, you've frozen. I will do everything in my power to protect you and I know Daisy will as well, but if we are not enough then I need to know that you will protect yourself. You are carrying the heir to the north, Rhaenys, he or she must be kept safe at all costs. Don't you think I know that? She snapped, voice as sharp as a whip. I can't. Can't what? He growled. I can't lose this child too. Tears burned her eyes and she clenched her jaw, spinning away from him. Her hands gripped the railing of the ship as she struggled to take deep breaths, blinking rapidly to keep the tears at bay. There was a long, heavy moment of silence. When Daemon spoke again, his voice was softer, if a bit confused. Rhaenys. I was with child once before, she told them, her hand drifting to her belly as she remembered the bean-sized flesh that had been her child. That pain was unlike anything I ever felt before and I can't go through that again. I don't think I can survive it. Her voice broke and she abruptly stopped speaking, feeling queasy. A hand touched her shoulder and she turned to see Daemon standing behind her, his face sympathetic. She glanced around for Egon, but he had mysteriously disappeared. I cannot possibly imagine what you must have gone through, Daemon murmured, touching her arm gently and drawing her attention back to him. It must have been very difficult. I have this dream every night, she confessed, looking down at her hands. It varies slightly, but the end result is always the same. Whether by sword or poison or some other means, I always end up losing my baby. Then Robb is there. She swallows hard as his devastated and accusatory expression comes to her mind's eye. It wasn't hard to remember, it was similar to the one he gave her before she left. And I have to explain to him that I've lost his child again. We won't let that happen, Daemon swore to her, his voice heated. He put both hands on her shoulders, bending down slightly to capture her gaze. We are going to do everything in our power to keep you and your baby safe, Rhaenys. But you can't freeze when there's danger near. There may be a time when Daisy or I, or even Egon won't be there, and you might be the only one to keep you and the baby safe. You're right, Rhaenys whispered, nodding shakily. You're right, of course. She looked up at him, clutching his arms now. I've never felt fear like this before. How do I get past it? We'll do it together, he promised, bringing her close and dropping a kiss to the top of her head. She gripped the back of his shirt, taking the strength that he was offering her and clinging desperately to his words. One step at a time. Rhaenys stared up at the harpy of Astapa with wide eyes. A woman's torso, the wings of a bat, the legs of an eagle, a scorpion's tail, all while holding a heavy chain. Just as it had appeared in her dream. Her eyes roved over the city, trying to take everything in at once. It was very red. Every pyramid, building and even the walls were built with the same red brick. It seemed as if the entire city was crumbling, giving it a very old appearance. They had been docked at the port for only a couple of hours, but already there was a thin layer of red dust around the ship. "Do you think Daemon will be much longer?" she asked Daisy, glancing at the tall woman beside her. Daemon had volunteered to scout out the city, to listen to and follow the rumors of a girl with 3 dragons, for they must be difficult to hide. Aegon was currently below deck with Meraxes, feeding her and keeping her calm and out of sight. They didn't want any trouble within the first few hours of arriving. She felt anxious. After these long days and nights, they had finally reached their destination and were that much closer to finding her aunt. "Not too much longer, I shouldn't think," Daisy replied, scanning the bustle of people around her. Most of the people of Astapa had amber skin and dark hair and eyes. They wore what looked like sheets wrapped around their bodies, which the captain informed her were called takars. Most women wore masks to cover their faces from the red dust. "Look!" Rhaenys exclaimed, pointing to a cloaked figure that she recognized as Daemon. They rushed to meet him as he made his way back onto the ship. He grunted as they stopped in front of him, pushing his hood back and using a corner of his cloak to wipe the red dust out of his face. "You couldn't pay me enough money to live in a city like this. The dust burns both your eyes and your throat. It cannot possibly be healthy to breathe it in." "Well?" Daisy demanded impatiently, raising her eyebrows. "Did you find her?" Daemon shot her a look. "In a matter of speaking." His eyes moved to Rhaenys. "She's not here." Rhaenys blinked. The possibility that she wouldn't be here had not even crossed her mind, and she had to fight a big wave of disappointment. "Not here." "But she was here. Caused quite a big ruckus too, by the sound of it." "How do you mean?" "Your aunt met with a slaver, looking to purchase the Unsullied." A dark look crossed his face and he continued at the look of confusion on her face. "Eunuch slave soldiers. The slavers take them as boys, castrate them and then give them a puppy. At the end of the first year, they are ordered to kill the puppy. If they do not, then they themselves are killed. They train to fight every day and only complete their training after they buy a newborn slave child and kill it before its mother." Rhaenys was horrified, her brown eyes going wide. That's complete barbaric." Daemon made a sound of affirmation. "Yes. Anyway, Daenerys bought them all. Every single one of them, even the younger ones still in training. She then unleashed her dragons on the masters and ordered her new Unsullied army to kill the slave masters and free all the slaves." "Unleashed her dragons how?" Rhaenys asked. "How many Unsullied does she have?" Daisy added, nearly at the same time. "About 8,000, Daemon said, responding to Daisy first. "Then several thousand of the boys still in training." Then he turned to Rhaenys. She unleashed her dragons, with fire. Rhaenys felt a flash of triumph and excitement flowed through her. Her dragons could breathe fire. How much older were her dragons than Meraxes? How much longer until her dragon could breathe fire? "What would you like to do next, Your Grace?" "Follow her," Rhaenys told him instantly. "We didn't come all this way for nothing." Daemon grinned at her. "That's what I wanted to hear. I'll go tell the captain." Daenerys Targaryen made it very easy to follow her. She left Astapa and headed toward Yunkai, another slaver city on the coast of Slavers Bay. Yunkai apparently received news about the fall of Astapa, because the masters in this city attempted to fight. She managed to convince the Second Sons and the Storakraus, 2 sellsword companies, to join her and defeat Yunkai, liberated their slaves as well. Now armed with Unsullied as well as the sellswords, she continued her march towards Meereen. "Are you ready for this, Your Grace?" Rhaenys looked up at Daemon standing beside her, then over at Daisy standing on the other side. Both of them had their swords at their sides, but those were only the weapons that were visible to the eye. Rhaenys herself had her 2 daggers belted around her waist and hidden behind her back by her cloak. Egon was standing off to the side of them a bit, his face unreadable, but his sword was strapped to his back and he had volunteered to come with them, at least. I'm ready. Rhaenys nodded, feeling a flutter of nerves go through her stomach at the words. I would we could have gotten you a dress befitting a queen. Daisy sighed, looking at her outfit. Rhaenys looked down and smoothed her slightly dirty and worn dress. It'll have to do, Daisy. I didn't exactly have time to pack my finest gowns. Merax's claws dug into her skin from where she was perched on her shoulder, shifting her wings slightly. Rhaenys held out her right arm and her dragon climbed down it. Fly, Merax's Rhaenys whispered in High Valyrian, running a hand down her neck, between her spikes. Her golden eye blinked up at her. Stay hidden. Rhaenys' hair ruffled as Merax's beat her wings, taking flight into the darkening sky. They watched her for a moment before Rhaenys tore her gaze away. She started forward, her unofficial queen's guard on either side of her and her brother bringing up the rear. They must have known Daenerys was coming, she heard Egon mutter as they walked. Rhaenys had to agree with him. They walked through mile after mile of scorched earth. Trees, grass, wheat, everything was burnt and unusable. Just as Daemon had told her, it didn't take them long to reach the edge of Daenerys Targaryen's camp. They looked across the open field, noting the hundreds of fires spanning into the distance. Two guards moved towards them, wearing a quilted tunic, a short sword around shield and a spiked bronze cap. Their faces were expressionless as they stopped in front of them, but the message couldn't have been clearer, they would go no further. Rhaenys opened her mouth and made to step forward when Daisy stopped her with a hand on her arm. She stepped forward instead, shoulders drawn back. I present to you, Rhaenys Stark of Westeros, Queen in the North. She waited for half a moment, but when the soldier did nothing, she continued. We wish to seek an audience with Daenerys Targaryen. Another moment of silence and Daisy looked back at them, uncertain. They might not understand the common tongue, Daemon said. Rhaenys nodded, repeating everything that Daisy had said in High Valyrian and hoping they understood it. They must have, because the guards looked at each other and without saying anything, one of them jogged off in the direction of the camp. They only had to wait 5 more minutes before 5 more guards came back. A guard without the helmet stepped forward, and spoke to them in High Valyrian. This one's name is Grey Worm. I will take you to meet Queen Daenerys, but first, you must hand over all your weapons. Rhaenys translated for them and they exchanged a dark look. This was a possibility that they had talked about. Rhaenys knew that neither Daisy nor Daemon would ever have allowed 4 armed soldiers into their camp to meet either herself or Robb. She nodded at the others and they unbuckled their swords, handing them over to the other guards. Rhaenys couldn't help the hint of amusement that ran through her as they watched Daemon pull daggers and knives from every part of his body, piling them into the guards' arms. Where did you even hide all those? Daisy asked him, mystified. The corner of Daemon's lips lifted. You can search me later and find out for yourself, he said, winking at her. Daisy scoffed and rolled her eyes, but Rhaenys couldn't help her small chuckle. This way, Grey Worm instructed, leading the way. The other guards, not holding their weapons, fanned out around them, their hands on their short swords as they walked to the camp. They heard the camp before they saw it, and once they did, Rhaenys was shocked at what she saw. It was incredibly chaotic. There were no tents, old men, women and children were sitting or sleeping besides horses and mules. She watched a skinny dog chase a bleating goat with wide eyes, trying to hide her shock. After the relative quiet of the ship with only the ocean as far as the eye could see, this was all a bit overwhelming to the senses. Who are these people? Rhaenys asked, taking in their dirty, ratted clothing. Their dark, mistrustful eyes followed them as they walked past. Slaves, Egon murmured. Rhaenys turned over her shoulder to look at him in surprise. They must have followed her from Astapa and Yunkai. His expression was unreadable. Rhaenys turned forward again, quiet, taking everything in. They walked through a relative small portion of the camp, but she couldn't see where it ended. Just how many slaves chose to follow her? They reached a much more organized section of camp after a few minutes. Tents were lined up in orderly rows, the biggest one being a golden pavilion at the center, where she assumed Daenerys was. Men and soldiers were hustling about, getting their weapons and looking like they were preparing for battle. 2 more unsullied soldiers were posted at either end of the tent, both their faces as expressionless as the others. Their small group approached the tent. Rhaenys wiped her clammy hands on her dress before lacing them tightly in front of her. Nerves and excitement clashed through her, causing adrenaline to course through her veins and her heart rate to pick up. This was it, they had finally found her aunt. Everything rode on this moment. If she knew that this whole trip hadn't been a waste of time, then she knew she made the right decision in Westeros and her husband. Several people were crowded around a table, but they immediately stopped talking and looked up as they came in. Rhaenys' eyes scanned them, taking in as many details as possible. Her eyes fell on a young girl, probably in her late teens, early 20s. Her long hair was silvery gold and her eyes were violet, very similar to Aegon's. She wore a dark blue sleeveless dress with pants and boots underneath. Two men stood on either side of her, but she only had time to notice that one was significantly older than the other before a sharp, familiar-sounding cry caught her attention. Her head snapped around and there, behind the people, were three glorious dragons. She heard someone behind her take in a sharp breath. They were resting on what looked like man-made perches and she found herself drinking them in eagerly. They were bigger than Meraxes, maybe about 2 or 3 times the size. One, the biggest one, had black scales and red horns and wings. The other two were slightly smaller, one was a green and bronze color and the other was more of a yellow gold. They were dangerous. They were fierce. They were beautiful. Daisy let out a swift, violent curse beside her, causing Rhaenys to look over at her in alarm. "Daisy, what?" "That's my cousin, Jorah Mormont," Daisy told her, a furious snarl on her face as she stared him down. "Cousin?" Rhaenys looked in bewilderment at the man in question. He was a large, middle-aged man with a beard and a receding hairline. He was wearing a combination of wool and leather, and there, on the front of his armor, was a standing black bear, the sigil of House Mormont. His eyes were wide as he looked at Daisy, his face white. "He fled Westeros years ago and we haven't seen or heard from him since." "Grey Worm, who are these people?" Daenerys demanded impatiently. "My apologies, Your Grace," Rhaenys said, shooting Daisy a quick look. The other girl snapped her mouth shut, but Rhaenys could have sworn she heard her grinding her teeth. She stepped forward, drawing everyone's attention. "This is Daisy Mormont of Bear Island and Sir Demon Sand, the bastard of God's grace," she told them, gesturing to each of them. "My name is Rhaenys Stark of Westeros, Queen in the North, and this is my brother, Aegon Targaryen." She paused a moment, taking in the varying expressions of absolute shock and disbelief. "Our mother was Princess Elia Martell of Dorne, and our father was the Crown Prince, Rhaegar Targaryen." "Impossible," Jorah Mormont scoffed, shaking his head. The old man said nothing, but his eyes were wide and moving from Rhaenys to Aegon and back. Daenerys Targaryen did not look pleased. "Is this some sort of joke? My brother's children are dead, they were murdered during the sack of King's Landing." "That's what the world was led to believe, but someone smuggled us out of King's Landing. We had to go into hiding." "I don't believe you," Daenerys cut in, her violet eyes flashing dangerously. "And frankly, I don't have time for this, I have a battle to win." "No. This isn't how it was supposed to go. Please, I am telling you the truth. My name is..." She dismissed them, turning back to the map on her table. "Grey Worm, take our guests to a tent and have someone guard them until the battle is won." A flash of anger and irritation ran through Rhaenys as the guards around them stepped closer, and there was a faraway shriek in response. The 3 dragons' heads whipped around at the sound just as Daenerys' head snapped up. There was a commotion from outside, several people yelling and scrambling as Meraxes dropped out of the sky with another shriek. Daenerys' 3 dragons roared, one of them even breathing fire above their heads, their voices drowning out Meraxes as she landed on Rhaenys' shoulder once more. Her golden eyes were narrowed in fury, and even though the other dragons were bigger than her, Rhaenys' little white dragon didn't back down an inch. The tent was so full of tension that Rhaenys felt like she was drowning in it. "As I said before," she told Daenerys, pleased to see that the other girl was now taking them seriously. She was staring at Meraxes with wide, incredulous eyes. "My name is Rhaenys and this is my brother Aegon. We are Rhaegar Targaryen's children." Chapter 29, Convince Me. Daenerys Targaryen took the city of Meereen in a single night. After Meraxes' grand entrance, she had shown Rhaenys and her people to a spare tent and told them to wait until she called on them. They were told that they weren't prisoners, but several guards were posted outside their tent anyway. From the rumors they heard, she had sent several of her unsullied men into the sewers, disguised as slaves. They armed the other slaves of Meereen and together they rose up and overtook the city. The plan worked well, perhaps too well. Dead bodies were piled in the streets, their blood pooling in puddles around them. The Meereenese slaves and the starving horde following Daenerys looted the city, killing those that got in their way. When the Unsullied got the city back under control, Rhaenys and the others were ushered in. Meereen was huge. The outer walls were thick, with defensive towers at every angle. There were several smaller, different-colored pyramids throughout the city. She saw a pink and white and a green and black pyramid on the way through the city to the Great Pyramid. The Great Pyramid towered over the other pyramids. A harpy used to stand at the top, but it was torn down during the siege. It was replaced with a huge black flag, a blood-red three-headed dragon emblazoned across the center of it. Rhaenys stared up at it as she walked into the pyramid, a strange feeling in her chest at the sight. Meraxes nuzzled her scaly face against hers, making Rhaenys' lips twitch. Rhaenys hadn't let her out of her sight since she saw Daenerys and her dragon's reactions to her. She lost track of how many flights of stairs they climbed, but her legs were burning and she felt embarrassingly out of breath when they finally reached their destination. If they stayed, she was really going to have to continue training with Daemon in order to stay in shape. They were shown into two rooms, one for Rhaenys and Daisy and one for Aegon and Daemon. Daemon sent Rhaenys a look of annoyance over his shoulder as they went into their room, but she could only shrug. Rhaenys' room was decent. The bed was large, the sheets were smooth and the one window in the room showed a breathtaking view of the city. There was a small writing desk along the far wall and a table and two chairs on the other side, a bowl of fruit on top. Daisy's room was attached to hers, though it was separated by a door. Her room was smaller and the furnishings weren't as nice as Rhaenys, but Daisy must not have cared because she fell face first into it. Smiling slightly, Rhaenys walked further into the room, letting Meraxes jump from her arms onto the bed. "Stay close, Meraxes," Rhaenys murmured to her in High Valyrian. Meraxes blinked her golden eyes up at her, her head tilting to the side slightly. "Daenerys may be my aunt, but we are not giving her our trust this early on." She rubbed her favorite spot between her wings, causing Meraxes to snake her head forward happily, her wings opening slightly. "Did you see her dragons though? Never in my life did I think I would see a dragon, and now I've seen 4. Your Grace." Rhaenys looked over her shoulder to see Daisy standing in the doorway, watching them both. "How are you feeling? Are you doing all right?" Rhaenys sent her a reassuring smile as Daisy moved to sit in one of the chairs at the table. "I'm a little worried that Daemon has strangled Aegon, but other than that I'm doing all right." "I don't." She stopped for a second, looking down with a shrug. "I didn't really know what to expect from meeting my aunt for the first time, but I guess I was hoping that it would have gone differently. That she would be happy to see the nephew and niece that she thought had been murdered. I don't know. It's stupid." "It's not," Daisy disagreed gently. "I haven't known you long, Your Grace, but anyone can see how important your family is to you. Give your aunt some time. It can be pretty shocking to have someone you thought was dead show up in your life with a dragon, I know from experience." Rhaenys chuckled at the grin on Daisy's face, her green eyes twinkling. "Point taken." She rose, walking to the window and leaning against it, watching the tiny dots of people moving in the streets below. "I want to be honest with my aunt," she told Daisy, voicing something that she had been struggling with for several hours. "I want to tell her my story and I want to try to convince her to join our cause." She paused for a moment, looking down as she placed a hand over her flat stomach. "But I am not going to tell her about my baby until I know I can trust her." She spun around, looking at her imploringly, trying to get her to understand. "I want to change. I want to be a better person, a person that will deserve Robb. But I will not put my baby at risk." Daisy stood, walking over to Rhaenys and taking her hands, bending slightly to make sure she had her full attention. "I don't presume to know what happened between you and the king, and I don't presume to know what it means to be a wife. Frankly, it's none of my business. But I do know that you are a queen. And sometimes, queens need to do whatever is necessary to benefit their people. I trust you, Your Grace." Rhaenys squeezed her hands gratefully, blinking away tears and cursing her fluctuating emotions. "Thank you, Daisy. Your support means more to me than you know." She hesitated, searching her friend's gaze. "Should we talk about the fact that your cousin is here, half a world away?" A flash of anger flickered across her face as she pulled away. "Jorah Mormont." She spat his name like a curse. "My dear cousin Jorah met a woman named Lioness Hightower at a tourney years ago. He won the tourney and named her his Queen of Love and Beauty. They married and he brought her home to Bear Island. Lioness was accustomed to a certain wealthy lifestyle. Jorah tried to give her the life she was used to, but he fell into debt. In order to pay off his debt, the idiot sold poachers to a Tiroshi slaver and Lord Stark condemned him to death. His father, my uncle, is Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. He had the option to take the Black, but instead he took Lioness and fled Westeros before Lord Stark arrived on Bear Island. My mother took over as head of House Mormont when he fled. That was 5 years ago. We haven't heard from him since." "I'm sorry," Daisy Rhaenys murmured. "That must have been hard for you and your family." Daisy shrugged it off. "The women of Bear Island are strong, we've had no choice. I would love to visit Bear Island one day." She was interested to see the place that shaped women like Maege and Daisy Mormont. "Maybe meet all your sisters." Daisy sent her a wicked grin, green eyes twinkling. "I think you'd like them. Alysanne is as stubborn and prickly as a bear. She'll give you her opinion whether you asked for it or not, and she won't mince words. Lyra is the pretty one of all of us, and as diplomatic as a Mormont can get. Jory loves to learn, she has pretty much devoured every book in the library. And Lyanna." She trailed off, her face softening as she thought of her youngest sister. "You're not supposed to have favorites, but Lyanna is mine. She's a Spitfire at 9 and already destined for great things. You must miss them." "I do." Daisy sent her a glance. "But no more than you're probably missing your family." "Yes," Rhaenys whispered, looking back out the window. Missing her family. The words didn't seem enough for the pain and longing in her chest. She missed Arianne and Tristan, her father, the rest of her Sand Snake cousins. She missed Dawn, she missed Winterfell, she missed her Stark family. "But that's why we're doing all this, right? To make the world a better and safer place for them." She paused for a moment, considering. "It didn't start out that way, I suppose. We left the North in order to free Lord Stark and rescue Sansa and Arya. Now Lord Stark is dead and we don't know where Arya is. While we still have to rescue Sansa, I feel like our objective has changed. I want our future children to live in a world where the North is independent from the rest of Westeros. A world where Robb Stark is our king. You're worried about him, aren't you? I can hear it in your voice." Robb. He was always hovering around the edges of her thoughts, but she had been trying not to think of him lest she get too distracted. Daisy hurriedly spoke again when Rhaenys was quiet. "My apologies if I overstepped, Your Grace." No, it's all right," Daisy Rhaenys reassured her, turning back around. "I'm always worried about Robb," she chuckled, shaking her head. "It's going to be difficult to know that I'm alive when the rest of Westeros think that I'm dead. He's going to have to pretend that I am dead as well, he's going to have to do what is necessary to win. That could mean making new alliances." Daisy caught on to her meaning at once. "His Grace wouldn't. His Grace might not have a choice. He needs more men in order to defeat the Lannister army. A marriage alliance could be the only way to do that." The thought of Robb marrying another woman hurt so bad it was a wonder that she didn't fall to her knees. She couldn't help picturing him kissing another woman, touching another woman and loving another woman. She violently shoved those images to the back of her mind. If she didn't, she might just call off the entire trip and go home. He doesn't know he has an heir. Rhaenys saw a grim expression on Daisy's face when she glanced over at her. "Which is why we have to convince my aunt to join our cause and learn as much about dragons as we can as fast as we can. I have no intention of delivering my child without my husband by my side. That doesn't give us much time." "No, it doesn't. Let's hope Queen Daenerys calls on us soon so we can begin to convince her that we are who we say we are." There was a knock on their door several hours later. Daisy opened it to find the unsullied soldier Grey Worm standing there. He wasn't wearing his helmet this time around and Rhaenys was able to truly see him for the first time. He was much younger than she thought he was, probably only a couple years older than her. His brown hair was cut close to his head and he had no facial hair. "Queen Daenerys is ready to see you," he informed them. Daisy nodded and moved to leave the room, but Grey Worm held up a hand. "She only wants to see Queen Rhaenys." Rhaenys and Daisy shared a look. Daisy looked uneasy and Rhaenys could tell that she was unhappy with this new development. "It's all right, Daisy," Rhaenys quickly reassured her before she could open her mouth to argue. She moved over to the bed, gathering Meraxes in her arms and letting her settle into her spot on her shoulder. "I'll be all right." "I don't like this, Your Grace," Daisy argued anyway, sending a glare over her shoulder at Grey Worm, who stood silently in the doorway. The last time a Stark stood before a Targaryen in power, he was slowly cooked to death and his son strangled himself trying to save him. What if this queen is another version of the Mad King? "I've always said I don't blame the child for the sins of the father," Rhaenys told her, thinking back to her conversation with Lady Stark about Jon Snow. "And don't forget, I may be a Stark in name, but Targaryen blood runs through my veins." Daisy looked from her to the white dragon sitting on her shoulder and back. "All right," she said after a moment. "Daemon will probably kill me when he hears about this, but I trust you." Smiling, Rhaenys squeezed her arm in thanks as she passed her and headed towards Grey Worm. He glanced at Meraxes uncertainly. "Meraxes comes with me," Rhaenys told him in a voice that dared him to argue with her. "Wherever I go." He gave her a single nod before turning and leading her out of the room. Rhaenys glanced around and noticed 2 guards posted outside of their door and another 2 posted outside of Daemon's and Aegon's room. He led her up yet more staircases until they reached a giant, high-ceilinged room. If she had entered this room on her own, her head would be swiveling around, her mouth dropped open in awe. As it was, she did her best to control her reaction, her eyes the only thing moving to take in the splendor of this hall. The tiles and walls were purple and there were tall candles on each of the pillars, an unsullied soldier standing before each one. Daenerys was seated upon a bench at the top of a marble staircase, Jorah Mormont, and the other older man standing behind her. A young woman with dusty skin and short, tight curls stood to her right. There was a doorway behind her, and Rhaenys glimpsed yet more stairs leading up. Rhaenys searched her aunt's gaze as she stopped at the foot of the stairs, but she found it unreadable. Grey Worm and another unsullied soldier took up posts on either side of the marble staircase, looking straight ahead. Her aunt was beautiful, she was thin, her features were delicate, her purple eyes were captivating, there was not a single silver blonde hair out of place, but all Rhaenys could think was how young she looked. It didn't matter though. Combined with the hall, the soldiers, the 2 unyielding men behind her, it all made for a very intimidating scene. Which she supposed was the point. The young woman stepped forward. "You have the honor of speaking to Daenerys of the House Targaryen, the first of her name, the Unburnt, Queen of the Andals, the Rhoynar and the First Men, Queen of Meereen, Khaleesi of the Great Grass Sea, Protector of the Realm, Lady Regent of the 7 Kingdoms, Breaker of Chains and Mother of Dragons." Rhaenys found her eyebrows rising higher and higher as the woman continued to list titles and quickly schooled her expression. She felt hysterical laughter rise up in her throat and quickly bit the inside of her cheek hard to stop it from escaping. She really wished she had gotten more sleep last night. The hall was silent for a long moment before Daenerys spoke. "Rhaenys Stark," she said slowly, her violet gaze positively piercing her and missing nothing. "Queen in the North. How exactly did that come to be? Tell me your story," she demanded. "It's a long story, Your Grace," Rhaenys said lightly. "You come to me, claiming to be my long-dead niece. You bring a young man claiming to be my long-dead nephew." Daenerys tilted her head to the side, her voice hard. "Not only that, but you come bearing the name of the usurper's dog. In case you have forgotten, the Starks helped overthrow my father and kill my brother." Her gaze shifted to the dragon sitting on Rhaenys' shoulder. "You will tell me your story and I will decide whether or not I believe you. Convince me." Rhaenys felt her heart pick up speed. All the risks that they had taken all led up to this moment. She needed to convince her aunt. She needed to make faking her death and leaving Robb behind mean something. She felt like their lives depended on it. Lacing her fingers together in front of her, Rhaenys started at the beginning. I was 3 when someone smuggled me out of King's Landing during the Usurpers' Rebellion. Those 2 children who died were not us. They brought me to my uncles in Dorne, and Prince Doran adopted me and raised me as his own daughter under a new name, Malyar Martell. Rhaenys' eyes hardened. For 6 and 10 years the need for revenge burned within me, fueled brighter and hotter by my father's and uncle's need to avenge Princess Elia, their sister. Your father's need? Daenerys questioned. Prince Doran, Rhaenys clarified. I know he's technically my uncle, but he raised me as his daughter and I think of him as my father. Daenerys considered that for a moment before motioning for her to continue. They knew of my desire for revenge and they knew I wanted to go directly to King's Landing. To appease me, yet still keep me safe, they proposed a marriage alliance to Robb Stark, eldest son of Lord Eddard Stark. Like you, I blamed the Starks for our family's downfall. My marriage was not a happy one in the beginning, I was full of rage and hate, but it was all pointless. It was Robert Baratheon who killed Rhaegar, not Lord Stark. Anger flashed across Daenerys' face. He fought against my family. In order to avenge his own. Rhaenys interrupted. Did you know that your father slowly roasted Rickard Stark alive? He put a noose around his brother Brandon's neck, left a sword just out of arm's reach and watched as he strangled himself in an attempt to save his father. I don't know how many stories you've heard about your father, but there is a reason why he was called the Mad King. Lies, Daenerys said automatically, her eyes narrowing. Lies spread by the usurper and his dogs. Lies. Rhaenys repeated, raising an eyebrow. Who on earth told you that? Her brown eyes shifted to the tall, hairy man standing behind her aunt. If you don't believe me, ask him, Rhaenys told her, pointing to Mormont. House Mormont of Bear Island fights with the North. He would have fought alongside both Stark and Baratheon just as his aunt and niece fight alongside Robb and I. Yet he now fights for you and sits in on your meetings. Do you trust him to tell you the truth? Daenerys didn't move, but Rhaenys thought she saw a flicker of something behind your purple eyes. Doubt. Uncertainty. When she didn't speak, Rhaenys continued on. Lord Stark was a kind, fair, honorable man who loved his family. He found out who I was but didn't turn me over to the king because he knew I would be killed. He went south as the hand of the king, and when the king died, his son Joffrey Baratheon chopped off Lord Stark's head. Robb had gathered his banners and they were marching south in order to free him. They named him king in the north and I became a queen. Daenerys' face was unreadable again. And your dragon? She asked, her eyes lingering on Meraxes. Rhaenys glanced up at Meraxes, who gave a small cry in return, ruffling her wings and making Rhaenys' hair blow into her face. Smiling slightly, Rhaenys brushed her hair back and looked back up at her aunt. I found her egg hidden in the crypts of Winterfell. I kept her a secret for months, but she didn't hatch for me until recently. Daenerys shifted on the bench, leaning forward slightly. Why are you here? I heard you had dragons of your own, so I wanted to find you, to learn as much as I possibly could about them. I also wanted to present you with an offer. Rhaenys took a deep breath. I know you want the throne for yourself and you must be unhappy with having not 1 but 2 Targaryens show up out of nowhere, both with a better claim than your own. Anger flickered across Daenerys' face and she continued quickly. Neither Aegon nor I want the Iron Throne. My place is in the north with my husband, I have no desire for anything else. You'll have to speak to Aegon about his reasons, they are his own to share with you if he wishes. So, here is my offer, if you come to Westeros and help us defeat the Lannisters and their army, I will back your claim to the Iron Throne as long as you give the North their independence. Robb Stark remains the king in the North. You would have me rule 6 kingdoms instead of 7. Margaery Tyrell's words came floating back to her. You would have us rule a broken kingdom. What if I refuse? Daenerys Targaryen asked, sounding like that was exactly what she was going to do. If I want to rule all of Westeros, including the north. Then you'll have a battle on your hands, your grace, Rhaenys told her, shrugging. The north will never again settle for being ruled by the thumb of the south. Their lives are different, their ways are different, their priorities are different. When I go back to Westeros, I am going back as Rhaenys, not Malyar. As a Targaryen and as a Stark, I'll have the support of Dorne, the North and the Trident at my back. If it's a choice between you, a queen who has never set foot in Westeros, or me, a queen who has grown up there, bled and fought for my people, who do you think they will flock to? You will have to defeat us as well as the Lannister army. You will have to defeat all of Westeros. Rhaenys heard her voice growing more passionate as she spoke, her eyes alight. I don't want that, and I hope you don't either. We're family, you and I. If we join together, if we make an alliance, I will back your claim to the throne, provided you give the North their independence. Rhaenys fell silent, staring up at her aunt, her mouth suddenly going dry. Daenerys was sitting very still, just watching her. Did she believe her? Was she going to order her soldiers to lock her away? Call her dragons to burn her on the spot? Rhaenys flinched slightly as Daenerys suddenly stood. Come with me, she ordered, turning to walk up the stairs without looking to see if Rhaenys was following her. The old man and the young woman followed behind Daenerys, but Jorah Mormont stayed behind. Rhaenys hesitated for a second, glancing at the unsullied soldiers before climbing the steps after her aunt, feeling utterly bewildered. Jorah's expression was grave as she passed the tall man, but she quickly forgot about him as she continued up. She paused when she reached the top of the stairs, looking around in wonder. She walked into what must have been Daenerys' apartments. She had the whole top floor to herself. The apartment was in the apex of the pyramid, so the ceilings were high and reached a point in the middle. A large, plush bed was resting against one corner, a seating area on the other side complete with soft, comfortable-looking couches. There were 2 walls of open doors leading outside, letting in lots of sunlight and a cool, pleasant breeze. Daenerys continued through the apartments and out onto the terrace. Rhaenys followed her after a moment, stopping abruptly when Meraxes tensed on her shoulder, her head perking up. If the apartments were pretty, the terrace garden was beautiful. Flowers that Rhaenys didn't recognize were scattered throughout. There was a large, inviting-looking pool and some sort of fruit tree on the other end. There was a loud cry and Rhaenys' head snapped up. She watched, eyes wide as Daenerys' 3 dragons circled overhead. They moved together fluidly, their strong, powerful wings flapping, muscles rippling. The black and red dragon landed first, landing between Rhaenys and Daenerys. The green and yellow dragons landed on either side of him. All of the dragons were still, watching Rhaenys and Meraxes. Rhaenys unconsciously locked all her muscles, hardly even daring to breathe as the world seemed to suddenly stop and she was aware of the danger she was in. Rhaenys' heart pounded once, twice, then 3 times, when by some unknown signal all of the dragons moved at once. Meraxes took off with a piercing cry, her claws drawing blood from Rhaenys' shoulder as she took flight. Roaring as one, Daenerys' 3 dragons also took to the skies. Heart in her throat, eyes to the skies, Rhaenys ran to the low wall of the terrace, her hands clutching the edges as if she were going to climb on top and jump after them. She could just make out Meraxes, trying to hold her own amongst the bigger dragons. They roared and clawed, shrieked and breathed fire as they tumbled through the sky. They were attacking each other, hurting each other. The other dragons were so much bigger than her. Please, please don't let them kill her. She felt more than saw Daenerys move to stand next to her, but she couldn't bring herself to take her eyes off her little dragon. And then, just as suddenly as it started, it was over. The dragons came circling back down, one by one. They landed on the terrace behind her and Daenerys. Rhaenys wanted to rush over to her Meraxes, check her over inch by inch to make sure she was alright, but something in her resisted the urge. She had landed between the black and red dragon and the cream and gold dragon. Rhaenys didn't know much about dragon behavior, but it almost seemed as though Daenerys' dragons had accepted her and she didn't want to disrupt that. What was that? Rhaenys asked with a quick glance at Daenerys before focusing on the dragons again, fascinated by what she was seeing. The dragons were making noises at each other. The green dragon would let out a short cry and Meraxes would respond. A test, Daenerys murmured, a small smile on her face. Dragons are highly intelligent creatures and I was curious to see how they would react to yours. What is her name? Meraxes, Rhaenys responded. Hearing her name, Meraxes looked up at her. She jumped, pumping her wings down and settling on the wall next to her. She's beautiful. May I? Rhaenys gave her a nod and Daenerys slowly moved her hand so that she was cautiously holding in front of Meraxes. Rhaenys held her breath. Merax's golden eyes stared at her aunt for a moment before her head snaked forward and she allowed her to touch her. Something inside of Rhaenys' chest eased. Merax's reacted to Daenerys in a similar way that she did to Aegon. She took to them much quicker than she did to say, Demon or Daisy. Hello, Merax's. You're an elegant-looking dragon, aren't you? How long ago did she hatch? About 3 moons ago. Rhaenys turned to eye Daenerys' dragons. Now that she was up close to them, she could see the significant size difference. And yours? Just over a year now. A year, she thought. A year and they were still relatively small. How long would it be before Merax's was large enough to ride? The black and red dragon is Drogon, the cream and gold is Viserion and the green and yellow is Rhaegal, she told her, pointing them each out. Rhaenys blinked. Rhaegal. Smiling at her, Daenerys nodded in confirmation. He's named after Rhaegar. Viserion is named after my other brother Viserys and Drogon is named after my late husband, Drogo. Rhaenys' head was swimming. There were so many things that she wanted to ask her aunt. Who was her late husband? What happened to him? How did she get her dragons to hatch? What was Viserys like and how did he die? What was their childhood like? She glanced up and met Daenerys' unfamiliar violet gaze and all of her questions died in her throat. Just because their dragons accepted each other did not mean that Daenerys accepted Rhaenys as her niece. She had to control her excitement at finding more family members and remember the position that she was in. In the resulting silence, a different voice spoke. You look like Princess Elia Martell. Rhaenys' gaze shot to the older man, her brown eyes narrowing. You knew my mother. He nodded solemnly. Rhaenys really looked at him for the first time. He was tall, with pale blue eyes, white hair and lined features. He had a quiet strength about him in the calm and confident way that he carried himself. Who are you? My apologies, Daenerys said, gesturing Rhaenys to sit on a bench and waving the young woman forward. We haven't made full introductions. This is Sir Barristan Selmy, Lord Commander of my Queen's Guard and my advisor, Missandei. Missandei smiled at Rhaenys as she handed her and Daenerys a cup of wine. Rhaenys took the cup with a distracted thanks. Barristan the Bold. Her eyes narrowed at one of the men who were supposed to have protected her Targaryen family. A man who bent the knee to Robert Baratheon as soon as he took the throne. Aren't you supposed to be serving in Joffrey Baratheon's Kingsguard? What are you doing in Meereen? I was dismissed from the Kingsguard for failing to keep King Robert safe. It was implied that I was too old, he told her, anger in his blue eyes at the injustice of it. Robert Baratheon was a sorry excuse for a king, but his son Joffrey is worse. He's a spoiled, cruel boy with a vicious temper. I left Westeros to find the rightful ruler to the Iron Throne. And I found her. Daenerys sent him a grateful smile. I was part of King Aerys' Kingsguard when your mother and father were wed. They lived on Dragonstone for the most part, but from what I knew of your mother she was a kind, gentle-hearted woman with a delicate health. Rhaenys heard a lot of stories about her mother from both her father and her uncle Oberyn. They loved to talk about her and Rhaenys asked about her every chance she could. It was true her mother's health was delicate. She was born early and she hadn't been expected to live, but she did. Her health kept her close to home, but her brothers loved and cherished her. Though her body may have been frail, her mind was strong. She was quick-witted, quick to laugh, kind and generous. With every word they spoke and every story that they told her, Rhaenys wished more and more that she had been able to know and remember her mother. Sir Barristan knew Rhaegar better, Daenerys told her. He could tell you stories about him. No, Rhaenys snapped, fury whipping through her at the mere mention of him. She was still lost in thoughts about her mother and the thought of Rhaegar Targaryen tainted the image she had of her. Rhaenys saw the shock on their faces and she forced herself to take a deep breath. Sorry. I do not wish to hear about him. If he's your father like you say he is, then surely you wish to know more about him. I know all I need to know about Rhaegar Targaryen. He publicly crowned Lyanna Stark the Queen of Love and Beauty at the tourney at Harrenhal and then abducted her, which started a bloody war and caused the death of a lot of people. Rhaenys could feel herself getting more and more worked up, but once again her emotions were out of her control. She couldn't seem to stop the words from coming out of her mouth. You could tell me that he did amazing things, but all I know is how he treated my mother, his wife. He insulted her, humiliated her and left her, Egon and I in the Mad King's hands. My father, the man I choose to be my father, told me that Aes used us as hostages to keep Dawn's allegiance to the throne. I hope it was worth it for him. He died, Lyanna died, my mother died, and we would have died if someone hadn't gotten us out of King's Landing. Rhaenys was panting by the time she was done, and after a moment she realized that she couldn't quite catch her breath. The sun was shining down on her and sweat trickled down the back of her neck. Her heart was fluttering in her chest and she knew the stress of this whole situation was getting to her. The small grey bean appeared in her mind and she remembered what happened the last time she became overly stressed. She abruptly stood in a panic, her eyes wide. "Are you all right?" Daenerys asked, stepping forward in concern. "I'm fine, yes. I think it's just the heat. Would it be all right if I go lay down and rest, Your Grace?" Rhaenys asked, her voice sounding strange even to her own ears. Daenerys frowned at her. "Yes, of course. I'll have someone escort you back to your room." "Thank you," Rhaenys murmured as she waved someone over. She called Meraxes over, avoiding her aunt's gaze as she followed the unsullied soldier off the terrace and back to her room. A feeling of despair settled over her and she left. She didn't exactly give Daenerys the best impression of her and she was worried that she had ruined everything before she even started. Daenerys watched the woman claiming to be her niece walk away with her dragon. Feeling contemplative, she took a sip of her wine before turning to sit on the bench Rhaenys vacated. She tilted her face towards the sun for a moment, closing her eyes and enjoying the feeling of the warmth on her skin. There was a small cry and she looked down to see Drogon walking toward her, putting his head in her lap. "What do you think of her?" she asked Sir Barristan and Missandei as she ran her fingers down the spikes of Drogon's neck. "It's hard to deny that she has Targaryen blood when she brings a dragon as evidence," Sir Barristan said in his deep voice. "While she has none of the typical Targaryen features, there is no doubting that she is from Dorne. She has the same delicate beauty as her mother did." "So you believe her then?" Daenerys asked, glancing up at him. "You believe she's truly Rhaenys Targaryen?" "Yes, I do." "And you, Missandei?" "I don't know much about Dorne and I've never met Elia Martell. As a person, she seems genuine enough." You could certainly hear the pain and anger in her voice when she was talking about her mother and father. Missandei hesitated. "How do you trust that someone is who they say they are based off meeting them once?" "What do you think, Your Grace?" Sir Barristan asked. "Do you believe her?" Drogon turned away from her, going back to his brothers. He nipped Viserion playfully, then took a running start, leaping into the air and flying away, enticing them to give chase. She watched them for a moment, taking the time to gather her thoughts. She felt as if her entire being was at war with itself. For so long, she had thought that she and Viserys were the last living Targaryens. Viserys' whole existence had been about regaining control of the Iron Throne. The need to be king took hold of him until it became an obsession, but all his plotting brought him was the nickname Beggar King and his death. When he died, she knew she was the rightful queen of Westeros and everything she's been doing had been to achieve that goal. When he died, she knew she was the last Targaryen. She had accepted it. But now there were two people who had found her, claiming to be Targaryens as well. Claiming to be family. There was a small part of her, the part that longed for the house with the red door, that wanted to believe them, wanted to know that she wasn't alone in the world. The other part of her wanted the throne, her family's legacy. She wanted to right the wrongs done to her family, to take back what the usurper had stolen. She's been working towards this goal ever since Viserys died. It was the one thing that kept her going through the death of Drogo and her unborn child, and the only thing that she had left now. "She obviously believes her story," Daenerys said, finally speaking up. The conviction in her voice is hard to deny. "And she has the dragon, a strong, beautiful dragon, not at all like the small and deformed dragons that Viserys told me about. She presented me with quite the offer," she continued, feeling anger rush through her veins yet again at the thought. "Ultimatum more like. Either I accept her alliance and rule 6 kingdoms instead of 7, or at least 3 kingdoms will rise against me when we land in Westeros. She wishes me to ally myself with the usurper's dogs," she spat, shaking her head. "It will never work. Sabaristan stepped forward. Your Grace. Everything she said about Lord Stark is true. The reasonings behind his role in the war and her assessment of his character. Ned Stark was an honorable man, even when he was hand in King's Landing, surrounded by liars, cheaters and snakes. I respected him as a man and as a leader. Daenerys turned to look the Lord Commander of the King's Guard in the eye, raising her chin slightly. Sabaristan had fought to protect her family, had served her father for years. I've heard my father called the Mad King before. I'm asking you, a man who served on my father's Kingswar during his reign, is the name Mad King just lies started by our family's enemies? Sabaristan did not back down her gaze, and Daenerys felt the enormity of this moment settle over them. No, Your Grace, he answered finally. She looked away then, her expression shuttered as something in her chest tweaked. Every child knows that the Targaryens have always danced too close to madness. King Jaehaerys, your grandfather, told me that madness and greatness are two sides of the same coin. Every time a new Targaryen is born, the gods toss the coin in the air and the world holds its breath to see how it will land. Her eyes flashed back to him. And what do you believe, sir? She challenged. Do you believe the gods have made me mad? No, he answered at once. I would not be here, serving in your Queen's Guard, if I believed you were mad. You are the true-born heir of Westeros, and I will be by your side for as long as you will have me. Will you? Even though Rhaegar's children might have come back from the dead. Rhaenys has it right, as I'm sure you know. They both have a better claim to the throne than I. Rhaenys is not my queen, even if she did say she wanted the Iron Throne. Of the two, her story can somewhat be traced. Though we don't know who rescued her from King's Landing, we could speak to Prince Doran and Prince Oberyn to verify her story. We can trace her past, but this Aegon, he was just a babe and he has no dragon with him. He might believe that he is Aegon Targaryen, but will the rest of Westeros? She trusted Ser Jorah and Sabaristan with her life, so why was it so hard to accept that her father really was a Mad King? Will you bring Aegon here? Daenerys asked Missandei, who had been respectfully quiet. I wish to hear his story. Missandei bowed her head respectfully and quickly left. Daenerys sipped her wine while she waited, watching her dragons fly above her, lost in thought. She didn't have to wait long before Missandei returned, Aegon in tow. Aegon Targaryen, she mused, greeting him. Queen Daenerys, he responded. She observed him critically as he bowed slightly to her. His hair was the silver blonde of the Targaryens, but it was shaggy and tousled, falling across his forehead and looking like he had raked his hand through it one too many times. He looked to be around her age, tall and lean. His eyes were the purple of the Targaryens as well, that she could not deny. But then, there were also Lysani, who had silver hair and purple eyes. Her eyes traced the scar that ran from his eyebrow to below the eyes, moving to the tooth piercing in his ear, to the tattoo coil of a tail that wrapped around his arm, visible beneath his rolled-up sleeve. He certainly didn't look like the rightful king of Westeros. I just met with your sister, she told him, tilting her head to the side. She's... She trailed off, trying to find an appropriate word to describe her. Intense, Aegon finished, the corner of his lips twitching up into a smirk. Yes, Daenerys agreed, nodding. She told me quite an interesting story about who she is and why she's here. Now I would hear your story. Would it be alright if we walk a bit? He asked, gesturing around the terrace. I've been confined to a room for hours with a man who hates me. I'd like to stretch my legs a bit. Daenerys rose, obliging him. Sabaristan fell into step behind them. Why does he hate you? She asked, frowning. Doesn't trust me, I suppose. I didn't exactly make the best first impression with my sister. Daenerys raised her eyebrows, glancing sideways at him. Now I'm intrigued. He shrugged as they slowly strolled amongst the different plants. There's not much to tell. I was raised by a man called Jon Connington after I was smuggled out of King's Landing. Sabaristan's eyes narrowed as he spoke up from behind them. Jon Connington drank himself to death. A rumor Aegon dismissed with a casual wave of his hand. Spread in order to protect me, to raise me as his son so that nobody would know who I was. We moved around a lot, never staying in one place for long. He taught me everything, swordplay, different languages, Westeros history, anything and everything to help groom me to become the king. I was in my 10th year when his past caught up with him. Men from the Golden Company found him, fought him and killed him. I became an orphaned, homeless, street rat who had to steal food to survive. A captain of a ship took me in and I've been sailing the seas ever since. Daenerys' frown deepened in confusion. How exactly did you meet your sister then? It was a 1-in-a-million chance meeting, he snorted. We came across her ship. It had been tossed about in a storm and they were sinking, taking on water. We took over the ship's crew, brought them on board and found Rhaenys, her friends and her dragon. When questioning her about where the dragon came from, I found out who she really was. You took over the ship's crew. I sailed aboard the Black Horizon. A pirate ship, he clarified in the confused silence. You're a pirate? She questioned, raising an eyebrow. Looking at his appearance again, she had to admit that he certainly looked the part. I was a pirate, he corrected, looking away. I killed our captain to help Rhaenys escape and now I can never be a pirate again. Word of what I did will spread and there will be a price on my head. So you just met your sister mere weeks before coming to Meereen, Daenerys said, somewhat stunned. He made a sound of agreement. She convinced me to join her on her journey to find you. I'm not sure what will happen after, but I know for certain that she'll try and persuade me to come back to Westeros with her. He paused for a moment. We had a very different upbringing. She grew up surrounded by brothers, a sister, cousins, uncles. Family is important to her and she's not going to give up easily. He shrugged carelessly. I didn't have a family growing up and I'm not sure I need one now. Aegon exuded this air of reckless indifference, giving Daenerys the impression that he didn't want to be here and he didn't seem to care that she might be his aunt. She didn't quite know what to make of him, but she knew she didn't trust him. Is Rhaenys telling the truth? You have no desire to rule Westeros? She asked, watching his reaction carefully. I'm tempted to say that I do just to see what you would do, he responded, smirking at her again. But no. Even when Connington was tutoring me, that was more his goal than mine. What do you want then? He shrugged yet again. I want to do whatever I want with my future without anybody telling me that I can't. Daenerys frowned at that. Well, you've certainly given me a lot to think about. I need some time to decide whether I believe that you are who you say you are. Does it matter? She blinked. Excuse me. He stopped walking, turning to face her fully. Does it matter if you think I'm truly Aegon Targaryen? He didn't wait for her to respond. Even if I did want the Iron Throne, I have no proof and you could just say that I'm an imposter. Daenerys opened her mouth to respond but she was interrupted by Jorah. My apologies, Your Grace. Your audience is waiting for you in your chamber. She nodded, turning towards Aegon and was about to tell him that she would call on him later, when her dragons came back, swooping and shrieking. It caught everyone's attention as it always did when they were around. They looked up, eyes following their movements. Drogon and Rhaegal landed near the tree, but vision veered away, landing on the wall behind Aegon. Daenerys watched the pair of them, head tilted to the side, brows furrowed. Aegon slowly turned to face the cream-colored dragon. Viserion rose to his full height, staring down at Aegon for a long moment before he slowly lowered his neck. When his head was in line with Aegon's, he abruptly spread his wings, opening his mouth and roared in his face. Daenerys' eyes shot open wide. She didn't think she ever heard him reach that volume before. Aegon's silver hair was blown back and for his credit he stood there without moving. When Viserion finally quieted, she saw that all the color had drained from Aegon's face and his purple eyes were wide with shock. Viserion folded his wings as Aegon slowly reached out with a shaky hand. Daenerys unconsciously stepped forward, both fascinated and horrified, as Viserion willingly snaked his head forward, nuzzling his head into Aegon's hand. Then, just as abruptly as it started, the moment was over. Viserion shook his head, gave another small cry and flew off to join his brothers. Aegon turned to look at her, eyes still wide, looking visibly shaken. What in the bloody hell was that? Daenerys slowly shook her head, wordless. But even as she did, a voice echoed in the back of her mind. The dragon has 3 heads. Chapter 30, Setbacks. Sleep still clinging to him, Rob rolled over, reaching out for his wife. He opened his eyes blearily and stared at the empty spot next to him in confusion. It took a few moments for him to remember, and when he did, he felt his heart drop and despair crash over him. He clenched his eyes shut, desperately trying to stay in his dreams. In his dreams, he and his wife were in their bed at home, in Winterfell. In his dreams, he could see her smiling up at him, her brown hair tumbling down her back, her laughter washing over him. In his dreams, he was light and happy with not a care in the world. Every time he woke up, the realizations slammed into him one by one. His wife wasn't here. Something in their relationship had shattered, possibly beyond repair. His father was dead, Jon was at the wall, Sansa was captive in King's Landing, Arya was missing and presumed dead, Winterfell was burned to the ground by someone he considered his best friend, and Bran and Rickon were nowhere to be found and most likely dead. As if that weren't enough, he could feel the war slipping through his fingers. He won every battle, but yet it still felt like he was losing. Everybody was looking to him, counting on him to succeed, and it was the heaviest weight pressing on his shoulders. Not for the first time, he wished that his father were here. Though if he were here, they wouldn't be in this situation, would they? The whole situation with Dorne was another unfortunate loss. Word of the fight between himself and Prince Oberyn spread through the camp like wildfire. It didn't take long before every man knew that the Red Viper blamed him for the death of his niece. Tensions grew between the two camps, and Robb knew it was all going to come to a head. Then, one day, Prince Oberyn walked into his tent. Robb turned, looking from the uncharacteristically grim expression on the prince's face to the scroll clutched in his hand. News from Dorne, Prince Oberyn informed him, holding up the scroll. They have heard about my niece's death, and now my brother is recalling both me and my men back to Dorne. Robb's mother had warned him that something like this might happen. He braced his hands on the table in front of him, trying to ignore the sinking feeling in his stomach. If you leave, I lose a large part of my army. According to my brother, we have no reason to ally ourselves with a man that had handled my daughter's life so carelessly. Robb interrupted, suddenly furious. We both know, he broke off at the warning look on the prince's face and made an effort to lower his voice. We both know that Marley, Rhaenys, is still alive. Yes, Prince Oberyn agreed, in a voice that was almost dangerously soft. But you still handled her life carelessly, and you took her for granted. She gave up so much for you. Never would I believe that Marley of House Martell would put her sword away and wait behind in the tent like a dutiful wife. All to please you, to make you happy. That's how I knew how much she loved you. And then you sent her away. Careful now, Prince Oberyn. Robb's eyes were narrowed. Marley spent our entire marriage lying to me and keeping secrets. He held up a hand when Oberyn made to speak. Yes, I know her reasons. While I can understand them, it doesn't make it hurt any less, and it doesn't bring back the trust that was lost. The two of them stared at each other, knowing that they would always be on opposite sides of this issue. For the love that my niece has for you, I promise to tell Doran the truth of what happened. It's too much of a risk to send in a letter. But I'm afraid there's nothing that I can do, Your Grace. My brother sends his orders. There was nothing that Robb could say or do to change the prince's mind, and so they packed up their camp and left within a few days. He wondered what Marley, Rhaenys, he corrected himself angrily for the 1000th time, was doing right now. Was she in bed as well? Did he haunt her every waking thought like she did his? Was she feeling the same anger, longing, confusion, and regret that he felt? He rolled over onto his back, throwing an arm above his head as he stared at the ceiling. There was a constant, aching pain in his chest that hadn't gone away since he last saw her. He missed her more than he could put into words. There were times when he thought he would give it all up, the crown, his army, everything, just to have her safe in his arms. More and more he was regretting agreeing to let her leave Westeros. He wished he had made her stay so they could work through their issues and pick up the pieces of their marriage. Robb grumbled, yanking the sheets up over his head. Grey Wind, who had been asleep at the foot of his bed, shifted so his head was resting on Robb's chest. The overall mood had been somber and subdued ever since his men had learned about the loss of their queen. Men clapped him on the back sympathetically and whispered words of consolation every time he passed. He had to shove his confusing feelings deep down whenever he was around other people, putting a mask on and focusing on being a king and leading his people. Robb understood why he had to keep the fact that his wife was still alive a secret. There had been 3 assassination attempts on her life, and it was really pure luck that none of them had succeeded. The assassin that had snuck into their tent in the middle of the night was thwarted by Grey Wind. The poisoned wine meant for her would have killed him instead if not for Prince Oberyn. And the only reason she had survived the attack and subsequent fire at the inn was because of, he didn't even know, her Targaryen blood. There was currently no safe place for her in Westeros. The Lannisters' pockets were deep and their influence reached far. In order for the Lannisters to stop trying to kill her, Westeros had to believe that she had died. He knew that, he had accepted it. So then why was this still so bloody hard? A knock sounded at his door and Robb bit back an annoyed sigh, pulling the sheet back down. Yes. My apologies, Your Grace, came the sound of his squire's voice. I came to see if you required my assistance. Just a moment, Oliver. Robb patted Grey Wind on the head one last time before he slid out of bed. He slipped into the pair of trousers that were thrown on the floor from the night before and pulled a shirt over his head. Had it always been this loose on him? Come in. Apologies for disturbing you, Your Grace, Oliver said as he opened the door to his bedchambers. He was a tall, thin young man, with sandy brown hair and matching brown eyes. His eyes flicked up to look at Robb before quickly looking back down again. Your lady mother has requested to break her fast with you and I told her I would check to see if you wished to. Yes, yes of course, thank you Oliver. Robb finished dressing, staring out the window. He stared out over the Red Fork, his thoughts still with his wife. Oliver retrieved his leather armor, which he had taken to wearing after his wife's supposed death, and helped him into it. Oliver had really stepped up since she left. In the beginning, Robb had been barely functioning, just going through the motions. Oliver brought him his food and made sure he ate. He had been a steady presence beside him day in and day out and Robb had really grown to count on him. He was a loyal squire, though definitely a bit anxious, especially as of late. Once Robb was suitably dressed, Oliver led him down to the Great Hall, Grey Wind trotting at his side. The only time Grey Wind wasn't with him was when he was out hunting. The few men breaking their fasts bowed their heads to him as he passed. Robb nodded in return as swept past them, spying his mother at the high table in the back. Mother, he greeted quietly, thanking Oliver as he took the seat across from her. Grey Wind settled patiently at his feet. Robb. She studied him with a critical eye as he piled a plate with eggs and bread. Her eyes trailed over the thickening beard over his pale face and the bags beneath his eyes. Have you been sleeping well? Well enough, Robb grunted, taking a large bite of his eggs without really tasting them. He paused, belatedly remembering that his mother was also suffering from a recent loss. Had she even had time to grieve her father? He looked up at her, noting just how tired she looked. And you, mother? How are you doing? She sent him a sad smile. You have enough to deal with without having to worry about me. You are my mother, I shall always worry about you. He snorted, shaking his head. But you have the right of it. There are whispers amongst the men. Did you know they are calling me the king who lost the north? My men are losing faith in me. The Ironborn have taken over and many want to go win our home back. He looked up at her, feeling like a lost boy. I am a homeless king. We have enemies to the north and enemies to the south. We are surrounded. Have you thought any more about Lord Frey's offer? She asked. You were able to delay in giving a response because you were grieving for Lady Malyar, but if you wait much longer you might lose more men. Robb's face darkened at her words. Seeing this, his mother sighed, her face softening in sympathy. She reached across the table, putting her hand on top of his. I know exactly what you are going through, Robb. Some days you feel numb and other days the devastation is so sharp and deep that you fear you won't have the strength to get out of bed. Mother. She shook her head, smiling. I know you loved Malyar, Robb, she was my good daughter and I loved her too. But Lord Frey will call his men back home unless you renegotiate the deal you made when you first crossed at the Twins. He wants. I know what he wants, Robb interrupted, savagely stabbing at his eggs again. His grandsons can no longer be fostered at Winterfell because Theon put it to the torch. Rickon is presumed dead, so the marriage between him and one of Lord Frey's granddaughters is no longer possible. And he broke off, jaw clenching. And with Malia dead, I can no longer ward my firstborn son at the twins. He shook his head. Lord Free presumes too much. I am his king. He cannot threaten to pull his men from my army if I do not marry one of his daughters. Lord Free does what he believes is best for Lord Free, his mother reminded him. He sees an opportunity to further his position and he is going to take it. Bloody Walder Free. Rob had tried to put off responding to Lord Free's outrageous request, but the old man was nothing if not persistent. On the one hand, how was he supposed to accept another marriage proposal when he knew that his wife was still alive? But on the other hand, how long would it be before she returned? What if it were many moons? What if it were a year? What if, his heart thumped painfully at the thought, what if she had died somewhere in Essos? Yes, well. There was a sudden commotion and the doors to the great hall banged open. Rob turned to see Oliver hurrying towards them, his face pale and his eyes wide and stricken. "Your Grace," he said in a strained voice, trying to keep quiet. I just heard." "What is it, Oliver?" Rob asked impatiently, his gut telling him that something was very wrong. "It's Lord Rickard, Your Grace. He's killed the Lannister prisoners." Cersei Lannister couldn't keep the smug smile off her face as she watched her little brother waddle into the small council chambers. When she heard what her father had planned for him, she couldn't help but be amused. He would absolutely hate it. "Good evening," he greeted, placing a large book on the table and awkwardly climbing into his chair across from her. Everyone was already seated. Lord Varys was seated next to her, positively reeking of his perfumes. Grand Maester Pycelle was across from him, stroking his snowy white beard, and her father was seated at the head of the table, watching everyone silently with his pale green eyes. "You all will be pleased to learn that after one conversation with Olenna Tyrell, I've saved the crown hundreds of thousands on this wedding. Never mind that now," Tywin Lannister dismissed, waving a hand. "We have more important matters to discuss." "Saving money is important," Tyrion pointed out, that annoying, sarcastic tone ever present. "I'm the master of coin, it's my job to save money." Cersei hid a smile as her father completely ignored him. "What news from the realm?" he asked Lord Varys. "Such terribly sad news, my lord," Lord Varys simpered. "My little birds have told me that Robb Stark's wife, Lady Malia Martell, has perished in a fire." Cersei missed the reaction from everyone around her. Blazing triumph spread through her at his words. Rhaenys Targaryen was dead. Her death by fire was ironic considering the Targaryen words, fire and blood. "Until there comes another, younger and more beautiful, to cast you down and take all that you hold dear." Now that Cersei knew that Rhaenys Targaryen was no longer a threat to her and her family, there was only one more soon-to-be queen she had to keep an eye on, her son's soon-to-be wife. Received word that Prince Oberyn Martell took his men back to Dorne after a nasty confrontation with the Stark boy, Lord Varys was saying when she focused back on the conversation. "We must bring Dorne to our side," her father declared. "Their princess died on the boy's watch, we must act now." He paused for a moment, before turning his gaze to Pycelle. "Send our condolences to Prince Doran for his loss and invite him to visit King's Landing for the upcoming wedding. We may be able to reach some sort of agreement." "Excellent, my lord, I shall send a raven at once," Pycelle responded, feebly nodding his head. "Splendid. You are dismissed." Everyone bowed their heads, and started to rise. "Not you, Tyrion. Stay, there is something we must discuss." Tyrion settled back into his chair, his expression turning concerned as he glimpsed the smug smile on his sister's face. Cersei began to stand as well, though she truly wished she could stay to see the look on Tyrion's face when her father told him he was to marry Sansa Stark. Cersei's smile slipped as her father turned to her, a pit of unease settling in her stomach. "Sit. There is something we must discuss as well." Rhaenys stared at herself in the looking glass that rested on the table in her new room. After her and Aegon's talk with Daenerys, she moved them further up in the pyramid. Rhaenys couldn't tell if these new, much more extravagant rooms were an indication that she believed Rhaenys and Aegon's identity claim or if it was just a show of courtesy. Rhaenys would have been fine where they were, but she had to admit that for bedchambers, this room was beautiful. Everything was decorated in different shades of light blue and grey, giving the room a very cheery feel. They were positioned higher up in the pyramid so their views were breathtaking. The beds were plush and the sheets were silky. There was a small sitting area with couches, a large changing screen in the corner which hid a beautiful tub and a large wardrobe which stored the pitiful amount of dresses she brought with her. Her favorite part was the table that she was currently standing in front of. An ornate-looking glass hung above it, and there were brushes, combs and perfumes resting on the table in front of her. Rhaenys had moved the cushioned chair out of the way and was standing in nothing but the thin, silk robe that had been provided for her. She had opened it all the way, hardly daring to believe what she was seeing. Her body was changing. Her breasts were definitely larger and for a moment her mind drifted as she imagined Robb's reaction to them. The corner of her lips tilted up as she imagined the things they would have done in the bed just behind her, but she had to quickly shake her head and focus on what had originally caught her attention. She had turned her body at all possible angles and ran her hands over it, but now seeing it in the looking glass there was no denying it. Her baby had grown and she was now sporting the smallest of bumps. She knew she hadn't been getting her moon's blood, she knew she had been getting sick a lot and she knew that her emotions had been all over the place lately, but seeing the physical evidence in the looking glass made it seem all the more real. She was with child, Robb's child. Her hand slowly moved over the bump, unable to take her eyes off it in the mirror. While it was absolutely, completely bizarre to see her body changing in this way, awe and unbridled joy filled her chest and before she knew it tears were spilling down her cheeks. Her mind wandered. Was it a boy or a girl? She knew a boy would be best in order for Robb to have an heir, but after losing her first baby all she wanted was this one to be born healthy. A small part of her wished that her baby was a girl. If it was a boy, she would eventually lose him to be fostered at the Frizz. If she already felt this much love for her unborn child, then she couldn't imagine the pain of sending him away to the Frizz. She pushed the thought from her mind. She already felt better knowing she was further along this time around. She knew herself well enough to realize that she was going to be watching anxiously to make sure both her body and therefore the baby were still growing. When she closed her eyes, an image of the most beautiful baby would appear. A baby with wisps of Robb's auburn curls, round, chubby cheeks and the brightest blue eyes. She wanted that so badly it hurt. She lost track of how long she stood in front of that looking glass, just staring at her bump. The tears had long since dried on her cheeks when she finally tied the robe closed and moved the chair to sit in front of the table. The parchment, quill and ink that she had requested yesterday were sitting to the side. She pulled it in front of her, dipped the quill into the ink and began to write from memory. Good daughter. How are things back home? Of course, that is where I would prefer to be, but it appears that won't be possible for me. Whether people understand it or not, I was doing what I thought was best for the realm. Lately I have been thinking a lot about family and I'm glad that you have become a part of mine. All of my children have come to truly care for you, as have I. Now I know that this may seem like a big task, but I pray that you will help look after them as I fear that I cannot. Destiny seems determined to keep us apart. Regret fills me at the thought, but I have the utmost faith in them. Even though we will be separated, I will always love them. Especially now that they are growing older and finding their way in the world. Do me a favor, good daughter, and only show this message to the others when the time is right. You'll know when that is. Your good father. Rhaenys had read Lord Stark's letter so often before it burned in the fire at the inn, that she had completely memorized it word for word. As she read it again for what felt like the millionth time, she felt the same sadness and frustration. Lord Stark had used his final moments to send this letter to her for a reason. She just couldn't bloody figure out what that reason was and it made her feel like she was failing him. A knock sounded at her door, startling her out of her thoughts. She capped the ink and rolled the parchment up, hiding it in a drawer where she hoped no one would find it. Come in. She called, turning in her chair to face the door. Your Grace. Daisy opened the door and strode into the room. Demon is ready for you and I, oh. She stopped abruptly, eyes widening and face reddening for a moment before she quickly spun to face the door again. I'm sorry, Your Grace. Confused, Rhaenys looked down at herself. All of you Northerners are the same, she sighed, rolling her eyes in exasperation. It's not like I'm naked, Daisy, I'm in a robe and all of my important bits are covered. Are you that offended by the sight of my knees? She teased with a grin. Your bits may be covered, Your Grace, but that robe doesn't leave much to the imagination. Rhaenys glanced down again and shrugged. Both the fabric of the robe and the climate of Meereen reminded her so much of her home in Dorne. The heat of the sun battled the refreshing breeze from the ocean, and the light fabric of the clothes in Meereen were so similar to what she would wear back home. Rhaenys pushed away the wave of homesickness that threatened to overtake her. With an amused smile on her face, Rhaenys stood and pulled a plain, casual dress from her wardrobe and went to change behind the screen. Daemon found the training hall then? She asked, slipping out of her robe. It's on the 3rd floor of the pyramid, Daisy informed her. He wanted to find the pit and the dungeons as well, but the Unsullied saw him snooping around and put a stop to that. Rhaenys thought she heard Daisy mutter idiot under her breath, and she couldn't help but chuckle quietly. Daisy and Daemon had such an interesting dynamic that Rhaenys couldn't help feeling entertained most of the time, when it wasn't exasperating and annoying. How's the little wolf pup doing today? She could hear the happiness in Daisy's voice as she asked the question. She had started calling the baby wolf pup and the name just stuck. Rhaenys liked it, it reminded her of Robb. Rhaenys, who had just finished slipping on her dress, looked down once more. She had lost weight during their journey to Meereen and her dresses had been hanging looser on her frame. Now, they were becoming a bit more snug. I'm going to need to have some new dresses made soon, I think. All right, you can stop facing the door now. That's a great sign, Daisy said cheerfully, peeking over her shoulder to make sure Rhaenys was decent. It means the pup is growing. She gestured for her to sit in front of the looking glass once more and began to brush through her hair. Rhaenys had originally protested, saying that she could do her hair on her own, but Daisy had insisted. She honestly didn't know what she would do if she didn't have Daisy here with her. She had become her guard, her advisor, her handmaiden and her friend. Did you eat the food I sent up for you? Rhaenys hid her exasperation. In addition to all those other roles, Daisy had taken on a protective, mother role. She was constantly fussing over Rhaenys, making sure she was eating the right foods, drinking enough water, and was feeling all right. Yes, Daisy. Though if you keep giving me that much food, nobody will be able to tell that I'm with child because I'll be so bloody fat. You're not just eating for yourself anymore, Your Grace, Daisy chided lightly. Her fingers flew through Rhaenys' shoulder-length hair. It was still relatively short from when she hacked it off after the fire, so the most Daisy could do was twist and braid the top half back. The pup eats what you eat, you need to be mindful of that. My sister Alysanne birthed 2 children, a girl and a boy, so I know the toll it can take on your body. Rhaenys stood once her hair was finished and turned, squeezing Daisy's arm. I know, and I appreciate all of your expertise and advice. I don't remember much about when Melorio was expecting Tristan, and I don't. She looked away, jaw working for a moment as she forced herself to voice a fear that she had been fighting ever since she realized she was with child. I don't know what to expect when it comes to carrying a baby or raising a child. I can't imagine anyone really knows what to expect with their first child. I'm not a mother myself, but I can tell you what I observed from my own mother and from Alysanne. You'll never be alone in this, Your Grace. Daisy gave her a bright smile, either not noticing or choosing not to bring attention to the renewed sheen of tears in Rhaenys' eyes. She had probably become accustomed to Rhaenys' quickly changing moods. Now come. We mustn't keep Daemon waiting, who knows what sort of trouble he'll get into when left alone. Rhaenys glanced around as they left the bedchambers, noting the 2 Unsullied soldiers standing outside her door. Daisy caught her looking and grimaced. One of them followed me down to the training hall and back, she confirmed under her breath. Queen Daenerys may be giving us free rein in the pyramid, but we have chaperones. Yes, Rhaenys murmured, keeping her voice low even though she suspected they didn't speak the common tongue. Her Grace mentioned that to me in our last meeting. Daenerys had only met with her one other time after their initial meeting, and even that was for a short period of time. She sent word, apologizing and explaining that she needed to focus on regaining control of Meereen and meeting with the citizens. Rhaenys heard rumors that she had crucified 163 great masters in retribution for the 163 slave children that they had killed just before her arrival. The whole city was both terrified and furious. Needless to say, Daenerys had her hands full. Rhaenys followed Daisy down what seemed like an endless amount of stairs, all the way down to the 3rd floor. The training hall was a large, square room broken up into different areas. She could see practice swords along the far wall and a section for archery practice. There were some unsullied soldiers undergoing drills and a few other men she didn't recognize. She spotted Demon in the far corner and he beckoned them over with a smile. "Are we sure that this is safe?" Rhaenys asked the two of them doubtfully as they approached. "I found these wooden swords that we could practice with," Demon said, holding one out to her. She took it, slightly reassured. Practice swords are preferable, but even those can cause broken bones if not handled correctly. Alysanne defended Bear Island while she was expecting. "As long as you're not overexerting yourself you'll be alright," Daisy added. "You know your body best, so if something doesn't feel right then just let us know and we'll stop." Rhaenys nodded, shifting her grip on the wooden sword and shifting her gaze to Demon. His grin was wide as he began to circle her. She felt herself automatically switching to a defensive stance, staying on the balls of her feet as she kept him in her sights. "It's been many years since we've dueled like this, Your Grace. Back when you were just a skinny little princess of Dawn. I hope you don't go easy on me just because I am your queen," Sir Demon, Rhaenys warned, raising an eyebrow at him. "I wouldn't dare." She caught a flash of his dimples as his grin widened. The slight narrowing of his sky-blue eyes was the only warning she had before he attacked. She instinctively raised the wooden sword to block the attack, and from there he didn't give her a chance to think. She was seriously out of practice. Her movements felt slow and sluggish, her reaction time slower than usual. Despite saying that he wouldn't take it easy on her, Demon was definitely holding back. He stuck to basic moves and didn't put his full strength behind his blows. He attacked her from all angles, and she knew he was getting her used to having a sword in her hand again. Rhaenys held back a bit at first as well, fully attuned to her body and the babe in her belly and waiting for the slightest reason to stop. Eventually though, she was pleased to find that her body held up quite well. She relaxed a bit, focusing more on the battle at hand and pushing to go on the offensive. It wasn't long before she felt her muscles burn from disuse, but she welcomed it, reveled in it. 7 hells she had missed this. Daenerys hadn't believed Sir Barristan when he informed her that Rhaenys was in the training hall. She had had a rare free moment and wanted to invite her up, but instead she was following Sir Barristan down to the 3rd floor of the pyramid to see for herself. She spotted Rhaenys easily. Both she and her bastard guard were dueling with wooden swords and were too engrossed to notice her approach. She stopped beside Ser Jorah's cousin, glancing up at the taller woman. Jorah had been strangely tight-lipped when it came to his cousin. So many emotions would fly across his face at the mere mention of her name, but the most obvious one was pain. "Lady Daisy," Daenerys greeted, green eyes meeting her purple as Daisy inclined her head to her respectfully. "Your Grace." Daenerys turned her attention back to the fight before them and was captivated by what she saw. She had only ever seen men fighting with the intent to kill. It was aggressive, savage and bloody. This fight though, their movements were quick yet fluid in a way that it almost reminded Daenerys of a dance. There would be a flurry of parries and blows before they would spin away and come back together. "I don't know much about sword fighting, but Rhaenys, she's quite good, isn't she?" A proud smile lit Daisy's face as they watched the fight. Demon is one of Dawn's finest swords, but Rhaenys was taught by Prince Oberyn Martell, one of the most fearsome warriors in the 7 Kingdoms. She fought with the North in the Battle of the Whispering Wood and had a hand in capturing the Kingslayer. I've seen her fight and I've fought by her side. It is an honor and a privilege to serve such a queen. Daenerys chose to ignore the sidelong glance that Daisy sent her. She searched for something to say as they watched. "Ser Jorah has told me a lot about your home, about Bear Island." Daisy noticeably stiffened. "Ser Jorah," she spat in a strained voice, "has no right to speak of Bear Island. He misses it very much and wants nothing more than to be able to go home. Bear Island is no longer his home." Daisy turned to face Daenerys and there was unmistakable glimmer of rage in her eyes. "My Uncle Gia took the black for my dear cousin. Bear Island was his, he was our lord and he threw it all away for that. Daisy ground her teeth, seemingly to realize who she was speaking to and swallowing the harsh words on the tip of her tongue. "Woman." Then, instead of facing his punishment or joining his father and taking the black, he fled, abandoning us and ruining the Mormont name. "Is everything all right?" They turned to see that Rhaenys and Daemon had stopped fighting and were heading towards them. Rhaenys' eyebrows were furrowed in concern as she looked between the two of them. "Everything is just fine." Daenerys smiled as Daisy nodded, taking a deep breath and smoothing her expression. Her eyes surreptitiously took in the other woman's worn, threadbare dress and tattered boots. She certainly didn't look like what Daenerys pictured a queen to look like. "You fight well." Rhaenys shrugged off the compliment, handing Daemon her sword and pushing her sweaty hair out of her face. "It's kind of you to say so, but I am terribly out of practice." She shifted her hips from side to side, rolling her shoulders. "And I am going to be very sore tomorrow." "That's not the first time a woman has said that after a session with me." Sir Barristan sputtered in indignation and Daisy rolled her eyes. Daenerys' eyebrows rose at the comment made to his queen, her eyes going to Rhaenys to see how she would react. To her surprise, Rhaenys shook her head and laughed, the amusement clear in her eyes. "Apologies for my Dornish friend, Your Grace," she said, still chuckling. "Apparently he's forgotten that he's in the presence of a queen." "My apologies, Your Grace." Daemon bowed low, sounding contrite, but she could see the grin still playing around the edges of his mouth. "It's quite all right," she told him, smiling as she waved off their apologies. "I can assure you I have heard far worse from my time with the Dothraki." Her eyes moved to Rhaenys. "I came to see if you would like to join me on my terrace. I have a bit of free time and there are some things I'd like to speak with you about." "Yes, of course. I just need to freshen up and change and then I can meet you." Daenerys nodded, pleased. "My Unsullied will escort you when you are ready." A short time later, Rhaenys had scrubbed the sweat off her body and was following Daenerys' guards up to her apartment, wearing a more fitting dress. Daemon was walking half a step behind her. He had insisted on accompanying her to meet the queen, saying that his heart had all but stopped when he realized Daisy had let her go without protection. He went on about how they didn't know Daenerys and couldn't trust her. When he brought up his promise to her uncle that he would keep her safe, she cut him off and let him come with her. "I need you to let me do the talking," she instructed Daemon under her breath as they passed through the audience chamber. "I have served your uncle for many years, Rhaenys. I know what is required of me. I promise to just stand there quietly." Daemon's voice was soft, his tone insistent as he spoke. "I would never do anything to jeopardize what you're trying to do, but I'm also not going to let you walk into the dragon's den alone." Rhaenys looked over her shoulder, meeting his blue eyes for a long moment before she gave him an appreciative nod. His outward appearance was calm, but she knew he was constantly checking his surroundings, taking note of the many Unsullied soldiers stationed last every pillar. They fell silent again as they walked up the broad marble staircase. Daemon whistled low under his breath as they passed through her impressive apartments and out onto the terrace. Rhaenys blinked in the sudden sunshine, shading her eyes and squinting in the blinding light. "Welcome, Your Grace," Sir Daemon Daenerys greeted with a smile, seemingly unfazed by his appearance. "Please, join me." She gestured to the seat across from her at the little round table that was laden with different fruits. Barristan Selmy was standing just behind Daenerys. Daemon took up a similar position behind Rhaenys as she sat down. "Can I offer you something to drink? Wine? Ale? Maybe a cup of that pomegranate juice if you have it?" Rhaenys asked hopefully. She had grown to love the sweet taste of it on a hot, sunny day. Daenerys looked to Daemon questioningly, but he just shook his head. She looked over her shoulder at Missandei, who bowed slightly and left. "How have you all been settling in? Are your new rooms to your liking?" "Yes, they're wonderful, thank you," Rhaenys said politely. "I'm glad to hear it. I'm sorry that I haven't called on you since our first meeting. Conquering a city takes a lot of work." "It is quite understandable, you don't need," she was cut off by a loud cry above them. They all looked up to see the 4 dragons circling above them and getting closer. It was difficult to tell Meraxes apart from Viserion, they were so close in color. She was only able to pick her out from the others was because she was so much smaller than them. Her eyes followed Meraxes, that same fierce pride running through her as she landed. Meraxes gave a happy, crooning cry as she walked toward Rhaenys. "Hello," Mera Daemon greeted when her golden eyes looked up at him. He grinned cheekily at Rhaenys' unamused look at the nickname. "Are you enjoying your time with your new friends?" She murmured, running a hand carefully down her white scales, taking care to stay away from her gold spikes. They seemed to grow sharper every day. Meraxes seemed to vibrate when Rhaenys reached the spot between her wings, and it took her a moment to realize that her dragon was purring. "You've been spending more time with them than me as of late. I'm starting to feel a bit jealous." "She fits in with my dragons very well," Daenerys told her, watching Rhaenys and Meraxes interact, her violet eyes missing nothing. "It's only been a couple of days, but as far as I can tell they've accepted her as one of their own. Does that surprise you?" "It does actually." Missandei came back out on the terrace, handing Daenerys a glass of chilled wine and Rhaenys her pomegranate juice. Rhaenys smiled at Missandei in thanks as Daenerys continued. "I never would have thought that there was another dragon out in the world, and if there was another dragon, I certainly wouldn't have thought that they would all get along." Rhaenys leaned forward, her eyes alight. "But why wouldn't they? Meraxes and I are not your enemies, and I think deep down you know that. If we created an alliance and joined together, we could take back our family's throne and root out those bloody Lannisters one by one. Who could stop 4 dragons with an army at their back?" Daenerys fell silent for a moment, her eyes on her own dragons. "I will not be heading to Westeros. Not just yet, anyway." Rhaenys' mouth fell open. Disappointment formed a heavy knot in her chest and she wanted to slump in dismay. "What?" she breathed, certain that she had heard her wrong. "My dragons grow stronger and faster every day, but they are not ready for war. They cannot hold their flame long enough, their scales are not yet strong enough to defend against weapons, and they are not big enough to ride into battle." Her gaze moved to look out to the city of Meereen, a frown playing around the corners of her mouth. "Meereen is in disarray. The great masters are unhappy that I've ended the slave trade. If I leave now, everyone that I've freed will be put back in chains again." Rhaenys could hear the emotion in her voice. "It is a noble and honorable thing that you are doing, Your Grace, but these are not your people and this is not your home." Her violet eyes snapped to her, narrowing. "What kind of queen would I be if I free these people only to abandon them again? I freed the people of Astapa from the masters and left a council of 3 wise men behind, a healer, a scholar and a priest. I left Astapa, not giving it a second thought as we marched to Meereen, and do you know what happened?" Rhaenys stayed silent, watching Daenerys as she struggled to hide the rage in her voice. "A butcher killed the council members, named himself king and began training new Unsullied. Once again boys are being taken from their mothers and they will spend years being tortured as they learn to fight." She shook her head in disgust. "I move from city to city, thinking that I am helping those under the thumb of the masters, but I end up leaving destruction and ruin in my wake. What good have I done since being in Slaver's Bay? How can I be the queen of the 7 kingdoms? Why would the people of Westeros support and follow me?" Rhaenys leaned forward, imploring. "If you come to Westeros with us." Daenerys, in turn, leaned back, her face clearing. "My decision has already been made. My dragons are not ready and I am not ready." She paused. "It will take years before Meraxes is large enough for you to ride. At this age and this size, she's an enormous target. Take it from me, when word of her existence spreads throughout Westeros, your enemies will either try to steal her from you, thinking they can control her, or kill her before she becomes too dangerous." Rhaenys looked down at Meraxes as she let out what sounded like an indignant cry. Her golden eyes were narrowed at Daenerys, almost as if she could understand what she was saying, and she didn't like it. Hot anger swooped through Rhaenys' stomach at the thought of anyone trying to steal her dragon from her. Let them try, it would be the last thing they ever did. Rhaenys sat back in her seat, lacing her fingers together tightly in her lap instead of crossing her arms like she wanted to. Frustration mixed with the anger, her brown eyes hard and her lips pressed in a flat line. "We will have to return home soon," she said. "I cannot very well negotiate an alliance with you for whenever you are ready to Westeros. When will that be? A few moons? A year? More? I don't know what state Westeros will be in and we are at war. We cannot sit around and wait for you." The two of them stared at each other across the table, family, queens, and neither one of them happy with the situation. "So where do we go from here?" Daenerys asked, spreading her hands. "Will you return to Westeros?" The thought of returning to Westeros a failure sent shame sweeping through her. She had faked her death, along with demons and daces, traveled for months to find a long-lost aunt, and for what? How was she supposed to face Rob with no alliance? It would mean this whole journey was a waste. I'm not sure, Rhaenys admitted. She broke eye contact first, blinking as she reached for her cup of pomegranate juice. Her frustration only mounted when she felt her eyes burn with unshed tears, and she cursed her tumultuous emotions once more. She took a deep breath, trying to center herself. Finding you wasn't the only reason that I left Westeros. She felt demon stiffen behind her, but she ignored it. She knew she was taking a risk and volunteering sensitive information to her aunt. Someone was trying to kill me. The first attempt was an assassin in the night. The second was poison, and the third time they sent a group of men after us. They attacked, and in the fight the inn went up in flames. I would have died. I should have died, she corrected softly, looking down at Meraxes once more, a tender expression on her face. But I think she saved me somehow. I was holding her egg when the fire reached me, and she ended up hatching. It was like she protected me somehow. Rhaenys paused for a long moment, remembering the screams of the poor girl who died, the feeling of the flames touching her skin, and the moment that Meraxes hatched. There was a girl with me, the innkeeper's daughter. She perished in the fire, and I made it seem like I was the one who died. Besides my husband and my uncle, Westeros believes that I am dead. Who do you think put so much effort into killing you? Some people in Westeros may believe that I am the rightful ruler of the Seven Kingdoms. There's only one family that I can think of that would benefit from my death. The Lannisters. Rhaenys looked up at Ser Barristan as he spoke up for the first time. The expression on his face was grave, and there was a righteous anger in his eyes. They dismissed me, gave the boy's dog, Sandor Clegane, a white cloak, and named the Kingslayer Lord Commander. Not only did they soil the reputation of the Kingsguard, but the Lannisters tried to have me killed. I had to kill 2 guards in order to get away. I believe the Lannisters will do anything to keep the Iron Throne. I'm sorry that they did that to you, Ser Barristan. Rhaenys shook her head. Every child in Westeros grew up hearing stories of Barristan the Bold, the man who ended the Black Fir Line and the War of the Nine Penny Kings and your feats at Duskendale. You deserved better. As did you, he said in a soft voice, inclining his head towards her. Rhaenys barely hid her surprise. Did this mean that he believed she was telling the truth? You are welcome to stay for as long as you need, Daenerys told her. She looked out to her city for a moment, and when she turned back her face looked uncertain. I hope that you do decide to stay, that is. I should like to get to know both you and Aegon better. Rhaenys searched her face, seeing the conflicting emotions, a glimmer of hope mixed with something else that she couldn't name. Thank you, Your Grace. We will stay for a little while longer. As for Aegon, she said lightly, smiling despite her exasperation. He's become quite good at slipping away from your guards. Maybe you'll have better luck getting to know my brother than me. Chapter 31, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Rhaenys looked at the various foods spread out over her table with a critical eye and her hands on her hips. She had eggs, bread, various types of fruits, sausage, bacon, and anything else a person could want to eat when they break their fast. Daisy was down in the training hall with Daemon, and Rhaenys decided it was the perfect time to have Aegon over to break his fast. He had been mysteriously absent since they had settled into the Great Pyramid, and Rhaenys had had enough. She was related to Aegon by blood, and she didn't even know what kinds of foods he liked to eat. So she requested a little bit of everything. She nodded her head once in satisfaction and marched determinedly out of her bedchambers and across the hall to Aegon's room. He was gone every time she tried to see him in the middle of the day, and who knows where he went at night. She woke bright and early today to make sure she would catch him in his bedchambers. She took a deep breath, steeled her jaw, and knocked on his door. She didn't even wait for him to answer, didn't even wait for him to shout an excuse, but instead threw open the door and stepped inside. She regretted it immediately. Her wide, shocked eyes took in the scene before her, her mouth falling open in horror. Her brother was in the middle of fucking an ample-bosomed brunette woman. He was kneeling on the bed, her feet were up on his shoulders, and the most ridiculous noises were spilling from her mouth. Rhaenys let out a violent string of curses, quickly slapping a hand over her eyes, though she feared the image of her brother's naked ass would forever be burned into her mind. She heard the embarrassed squeal of the woman underneath him, but she missed the furious glare that he shot at her. Bloody fucking hell, Rhaenys, out. Get out. His voice was full of rage and frustration, and she stumbled back into the door. I'm sorry. She yelped, grasping blindly for the door handle. I didn't, I only wanted, I'm sorry. She swung the door shut with a loud slam and stood there for a long moment, lowering her hand and breathing heavily. Seven hells, Rhaenys murmured, putting a hand over her frantically racing heart. What a bloody disaster, she thought as she shakily made her way back to her bedchamber. She closed the door behind her, leaning against it and shutting her eyes for a moment. A wave of despair washed over her. Was her relationship with her brother doomed? She had hardly gotten the chance to know him, and all her attempts to try were thwarted. She had promised Aegon that at the end of this journey they would go their separate ways if that was what he wanted. At this rate she felt she should prepare herself for this eventuality. With that depressing thought, Rhaenys plucked a persimmon from the table and moved to her window, leaning against the wall with a sigh as she looked outside. Juice ran down her chin as she took a bite, and she absent-mindedly wiped it away, her mind drifting. She had been trying to decide what they should do ever since Daenerys informed them that she wouldn't be traveling back to Westeros with them. Daisy kept insisting that they go back home, telling her that they needed to reach Robb before the baby was born. If they waited too long, then she might be too far along to safely travel. Rhaenys knew she was right. She knew they had to leave soon, but she wasn't quite ready to leave just yet, and she knew exactly why. She had just found her aunt and her brother. When she left Meereen she would be leaving her aunt behind, and she had a deep fear in her gut that Aegon wouldn't be accompanying them back to Westeros and she would never see him again. An image of Robb appeared in her mind, his auburn curls tousled, a grin on his face and those bright blue eyes that she loved so much. A wave of longing and homesicknesses swept through her that was so fierce it made her catch her breath. Gods! Was she doing the right thing? I'll want the dresses made out of this lighter material, Daenerys told the plump, older woman who was hurrying to keep up as they swept down the hallway. Similar to the ones that you have made for me. Silk, Your Grace, Keza replied, slightly out of breath. I've made your dresses out of silk. An expensive material, Set Jorah commented lightly. Are you quite sure about this, Your Grace? Does this mean you believe the girl is who she says she is? Daenerys considered this while descending yet another set of stairs. She still couldn't seem to think of Rhaenys and Aegon as her family. Viserys had told her that Rhaegar's children were murdered during the sack of King's Landing, who would have possibly saved them and put other children in their places. Now they just both happen to show up in Meereen and are seeking an alliance with her. Too coincidental. They were most likely just trying to use her in order to use her dragons. That being said, however, Daenerys couldn't help but like Rhaenys as a person. Which is what makes all of this so very difficult. I have enjoyed my conversations with Rhaenys very much. She is intelligent, passionate, and to be honest I find her very intriguing. Even if she doesn't have Targaryen blood running through her veins, she has the loyalty of the Martells and the Starks behind her. Building a relationship with her could prove to be very beneficial when we make it to Westeros. Ser Jorah sent her a look that told her that he knew she sidestepped his question, but he didn't have time to say anything because they had arrived at Rhaenys' bedchambers. Taking a deep, steadying breath and feeling oddly nervous, Daenerys raised her fist and knocked on the door. Rhaenys answered the door and froze. Your Grace! She exclaimed in surprise, her eyes moving between the three people in front of her. Ser Jorah. What a pleasant surprise. She automatically stepped aside to let them in. Is everything all right? Daenerys signaled for Ser Jorah to wait outside and gave her a reassuring smile as she and the Meereenese woman swept past her. Everything is just fine, no need to worry. This is Keza, a truly wonderful seamstress who has made all of my dresses since being in Meereen. Keza bowed her head, giving Daenerys a small curtsy as she murmured her thanks. Rhaenys closed the door, her eyes flicking uncertainly between the two women. It is nice to meet you, Keza. I'm afraid I don't understand. You have been in Meereen for a while now, and I like to think we've gotten to know each other a little better, Rhaenys. She said after a pause. She saw the surprise flicker across Rhaenys' face. This was the first time that Daenerys had ever called her by her given name instead of Your Grace. She hoped that Rhaenys recognized it for what it was, a step in the right direction, a step towards becoming more familiar with each other. I hope that I don't offend you, but I've noticed the few dresses you have brought with you are heavy and travel-worn. I've invited Keza here to take your measurements. I'd like to have some dresses made for you. Rhaenys looked touched, but she was also shaking her head. Thank you, Your Grace, but I couldn't possibly. Daenerys, she interrupted, with a small smile. You may call me Daenerys, during these private, informal meetings. Thank you. Daenerys, Rhaenys said, unable to keep her own smile off her face. You flatter me with your kind gesture, but I couldn't possibly accept, it is far too generous. Of course you can, Daenerys corrected, letting out a tinkling laugh. It is a gift. Rhaenys' smile became fixed, and she shifted uncomfortably. Thank you, but I don't need any new dresses. Daenerys shook her head, feeling both confused and exasperated. Why was she still trying to refuse? Stubbornness runs in the family, it would seem. You hurt my feelings when you refuse my gift. Is there a reason why you are saying no? Rhaenys opened her mouth, hesitated, then closed it again with an unconscious glance towards Keza. Daenerys caught the glance and frowned, feeling as if there was something else going on here that she wasn't understanding. Thank you, Keza, Daenerys said, her eyes still on Rhaenys, watching her fidget. That will be all. The older woman bowed, looking slightly relieved as she hurried out of the room. Once she was gone, Daenerys moved further into the room. She headed towards the couch, noting the abundance of food on the table. Were you hosting a small feast? She joked, hoping to lighten the mood. Her attempt seemed to have the opposite effect. Rhaenys winced instead, her face turning red. I was hoping to have Aegon over to break his fast, but he was busy. Daenerys considered that for a moment, but chose to focus on one issue at a time. I hope you'll forgive me, Rhaenys, but the few dresses that you have with you are cold-weather dresses, they are very travel-worn and, again, forgive me, they are not exactly befitting a queen. They were all that we could get before we left Westeros, Rhaenys said, sounding slightly defensive. I didn't exactly have time to pick up more appropriate dresses, I was too busy fleeing and pretending to be dead. Daenerys grimaced, already regretting her word choice. I'm sorry, I don't mean to offend you. I'm just trying to explain my reasoning behind my offer. I'm just trying to, I don't know what I'm trying to do, she muttered, throwing her hands up in frustration. This was not how she had expected or wanted this to go. No, I'm sorry, Rhaenys said with a sigh. You were trying to do something nice. Her lips twitched up to a sad smile as she glanced up at Daenerys and away. And I'm sorry that I wasn't more gracious in my response. There is a reason why my first reaction is to refuse your dresses, no matter how generous the offer was or how much I may need them. Daenerys read the torn expression on her face and frowned. But you don't want to tell me what that reason is? She was surprised to find that she was a little hurt by this realization. Rhaenys looked at her, running a hand through her short hair anxiously. Besides the fact that I still don't know if I can trust you, I have only told 3 people. Telling more people makes it more real and... She took a deep breath. And honestly, that terrifies me. Daenerys was positively burning with curiosity by this point, but she tried to rein it in. I won't force you to tell me anything, Rhaenys, it's your business, not mine. But I am here for you if you want to talk about any. I'm pregnant. Rhaenys blurted. Both of them froze for a moment, shocked. Daenerys' eyes unconsciously traveled down and stopped on Rhaenys' stomach. She didn't see a bump or notice anything different, but it didn't stop the hot swoop of jealousy that Daenerys felt in her own belly. Rhaego, her sweet, innocent baby boy, appeared unbidden in her mind's eye, and her hand twitched as if to place it over her own stomach. The old feelings of pain, regret and a sharp, desperate longing filled her, stealing her breath. Even after all these years, she still grieved for her unborn son. She had wanted to hold him and love him. She had wanted to watch him take his first steps, say his first words and learn to fight from his father, Drogo. She would never have that chance, ever. She would never have more children. Rhaenys, however, her supposed niece, would have everything that she had had taken away from her. Daenerys blinked, realizing that she had been silent for too long. Still reeling from the barrage of emotions, she fixed a smile on her face. Pregnant? She repeated, inwardly wincing at how high and forced her voice sounded. Is it your husband's? No, don't answer that, that was incredibly rude. I'm so happy for you. A child is a truly wonderful blessing, she finished lamely. Rhaenys was frowning, an odd look on her face. Yes, of course it's my husband's child. Are you all right, Daenerys? Daenerys turned abruptly, moving towards the window. She stared out of it, her gaze unfocused. The stallion who mounts the world, Drogo murmured, his large hand resting protectively over their unborn son. Daenerys watched him as he spoke, her violet eyes soft as her gaze traced over the man whom she had grown to love. His black eyes burned with promise, and the sound of the bells in his long hair accentuated every word as he moved. I swear to the Mother of Mountains that I will ride your wooden horses across the black water, and I will give him the Iron Chair. I swear it, moon of my life. Our son will be heir to all of Westeros. Daenerys responded with a smile, placing her hand upon his cheek. You will do what no Khal has ever dared to do, and we will make our enemies suffer for what they have done. Drogo shifted, pressing his hips into her and showing her just what her words did to him. She giggled as he shifted on top of her, leaning his weight on his elbows so as not to crush her belly. You grow fiercer by the day, he murmured low in her ear. If you keep talking like this, we will never leave this bed. I would be quite happy spending most of our time in bed with you, my sun and stars. Her words ended on a gasp as he gently bit her ear and spread her legs beneath him. She very quickly lost her train of thought as they both surrendered to the moment of passion. Daenerys. Daenerys blinked, abruptly coming back to herself and remembering where she was. Her chest ached as Drogo's image faded from her mind, and her arms ached to hold the son she had never even gotten to see. She crossed them over her flat and empty stomach, holding onto her elbows tightly. I'm sorry, Rhaenys, she apologized, turning to find the other girl watching her with a look of utmost concern on her face. She felt shaken and incredibly off balance. Why was she reacting this way? It's just been so long since I've allowed myself to think of them. Think of who? Rhaenys asked, moving to sit on the couch. Daenerys looked into Rhaenys' wide, trusting brown eyes and felt the words begin to rise in her throat. Part of her wanted to tell her everything, to talk about the two most important people in her life. The other part, the part who found it incredibly difficult to trust, made her bite her tongue. I kept my identity a secret from my siblings and my cousins for 20 years, and from my husband for our 2 years of marriage. I found Merax's egg beneath the crypts of Winterfell and kept it a secret from Robb. I drank moon tea, a medicinal tea that some women in Westeros drink to prevent pregnancy, and kept it from Robb. She was talking quickly, the words spewing from her mouth as if she couldn't hold them back. Even when I make it back to Westeros, I'm not sure if Robb will be able to forgive me. I was with child once before, but I lost the baby early on, and now I'm completely terrified of losing this one. Add that to the fact that I never had a mother, so I'm pretty sure I'm going to be absolute shit at it, and those are my biggest mistakes and my biggest fears. Your past cannot possibly be as awful as mine. Daenerys felt nothing but shock. She had never had someone confide anything like that to her before. Her tone was honest, but she could see the vulnerability in Rhaenys' eyes, and she could hear the anger and self-loathing in her voice. Daenerys carefully sat beside her, trying to digest all of that information that she had just heard. She placed her fingers in her lap, staring down at them, her mind at war with itself. If I look back, I am lost, she heard herself say quietly. Rhaenys frowned, confused. What does that mean? I cannot dwell on the past, lest I get swallowed by my grief or my pain. I started out with one goal, to overthrow the usurper and reclaim my family's throne. Now I want to do right by the people of Meereen and make sure that the slaves I freed have a future. That is what I have to focus on. Rhaenys nodded thoughtfully. I can understand that. It's important to have something to focus on, something in the future. She grabbed a persimmon from the table. Personally, that would never work for me though, she said, shaking her head. Daenerys sat there for a moment, waiting as she took a bite, but when she didn't elaborate, she leaned forward. Well, why not? Rhaenys swiped a drop of juice from the corner of her mouth, thinking. I mean, sure, a part of me would love to forget all the mistakes that I made. But I feel like I've learned from those mistakes and I've grown from them. Rhaenys put the persimmon back down, turning to face her fully. Do you know what I wanted most growing up? Daenerys shook her head, trying to keep up as she jumped from topic to topic. Revenge. Revenge against the Lannisters, the Baratheons, anyone who destroyed my family. Daenerys' frown deepened, her forehead crinkling. Are you saying that you don't want revenge anymore? No, Rhaenys said slowly, shaking her head. No, I still want justice for our family. But I feel like my motivations are different now, because of my mistakes. Now I want to fight for a safer home for my family, for Robb, for our child and our future children. I want to reunite my Stark family and I want to reclaim an independent North for our northern allies and to free them from the thumb of the South. Rhaenys hesitated, then carefully reached out a hand and placed it on top of both of hers. It took me over 9 and 10 years to realize this, but there's more to life than revenge, there's family. Irritated, Daenerys pulled her hands away, missing the flash of hurt on Rhaenys' face. Not all of us had a family. I wasn't surrounded by siblings, uncles and cousins. I only had my brother and he was cruel, weak and sold me for a Dothraki army. My new husband and I didn't even speak the same language, but we grew to understand each other and we grew to care for each other. Within a couple of moons I learned that I was with child. She stared across the room without seeing anything, lost in happier memories. You had a child. A son, Daenerys responded, her voice barely a whisper. We named him Rhaego. What happened to them, Daenerys? Rhaenys asked quietly, sounding as if she truly didn't want to know. Daenerys hardened herself against the pain, shoving it deep inside. Her voice was almost monotone as she spoke. Drogo suffered a cut during a fight and I allowed a god's wife to treat it, a woman who would have been a slave, but I had given her my protection. Drogo's wound ended up festering to the point where he was going to die. I begged this woman to use her blood magic to save him even though I knew there would be a price to pay. She betrayed me and I ended up paying for his life with my sons. He died in my belly. They said he was deformed when he was born, covered in dragon-like scales. I'm so sorry, Daenerys. Daenerys looked over at her, then away just as quickly, unable to take the horror and sorrow in her eyes. What about Drogo? Did he live? Daenerys recalled the way his eyes stared at her unseeingly, the way he couldn't really do much on his own. He looked like her sun and stars, but he had lost that fiery spark that made him him. In a way, I suppose. He was breathing but he wasn't able to do much else. Drogo was a gifted warrior and an undefeated warlord whose hair had never been cut. Within one glance I could tell that he would never fight again, never ride his horse, never hold me in his arms. I'm sorry, Rhaenys said again, looking absolutely wretched. Oh, I'm sorry, I always do this. Rhaenys swiftly stood, running her hands through her hair in agitation. Family has always been so important to me and here I am pushing what I believe onto both you and Aegon. She stopped talking, dropping her hands and facing her again. I was just so excited to find the little brother that I thought had been murdered, and then when I learned that I had a long-lost aunt and uncle. She trailed off, shaking her head. Daenerys stood as well, going over to her and deliberately taking her hands with a small smile. I like you, Rhaenys. I didn't want to, she admitted with a short laugh. I wanted to hate you for coming into my life, proclaiming you and Aegon to not only be Targaryens but to have a better claim to the throne than I. I don't know about family just yet, but I'd like to be friends. We certainly just learned a lot about each other. We did, didn't we? Friends, Rhaenys repeated, with a slow nod. I would like that too. So does this mean you'll accept my gift? Daenerys asked, making an attempt to lighten the mood. She circled Rhaenys critically, thinking out loud. We can make your dresses lighter for Meereen's heat and we can have the material flow and stretch more to accommodate your growing belly. Rhaenys smiled uncertainly. All right. I accept your gift. And Daenerys? Daenerys looked up at Rhaenys and was alarmed to find the other girl's eyes were shining. She let out a startled gasp as Rhaenys pulled her into a tight hug. Thank you for trusting me and for telling me about your family. Do. Rhaenys pulled back, looking at her cautiously. Do you want to tell me more about them? I'd like to hear more about Drogo and Viserys if you're willing to talk about them. I'd like that. Daenerys nodded, heading back towards the couch. Would it be alright if I ate some of Aegon's food? I had meetings all morning, so I wasn't able to break my fast. It's all yours. Rhaenys snorted, plopping on the couch next to her. He's certainly not going to eat it. Listen to what happened this morning. So what do you think? Daisy asked, hanging up the practice sword and turning towards Daemon. Do you think we should continue to stay in Meereen, or do you think we should head back home? Daemon shot her a pointed look. We've been over this, Dace. It doesn't matter what we think. Our queen wants to stay for a bit longer, so that's what we're going to do. She trailed off, trying to find the right words. I just have this feeling that we need to get back. Daenerys seems nice and she would be a strong ally, especially with those dragons of hers, but she said she wasn't ready to go to Westeros. Rhaenys values our opinions, and I really think that if we both sat down and talked with her that she would. Isn't there anything else that we can talk about? Daemon interrupted with a sigh, pushing his sweaty hair off his forehead. We just had an intense practice session, we're already sweaty, what do you say? He asked, circling her slowly, a smirk on his face. Shall we continue this upstairs in my bedchamber? If Daisy rolled her eyes any harder they would get stuck in the back of her head. In your dreams, Sand. I'm nothing if not persistent, Lady Mormont. We're both young, attractive, unattached and basically alone in a foreign country. Daisy pushed his warm, inviting voice from her mind. She would be lying if she said that she didn't find Daemon attractive or that she hadn't thought about the two of them together. She had been lonely since they left Westeros, but things with Daemon would get complicated. They had both promised to protect Rhaenys and keep her safe while she went to find her aunt, and if they got together it would make that job much more difficult. If you're quite finished, I have to get back. I told our queen that I would give her some time alone with her brother, and I think it's been long enough, Daisy said over her shoulder, brushing past him slightly as she began to walk away. She could feel his eyes on her as she left, and she couldn't help the satisfied smile playing on the edge of her lips. She headed back up the many flights of stairs, once again thinking of how she could convince Rhaenys to head back to Westeros. She could bring up the fact that if they wait too long then Robb may have to marry someone else. Rhaenys has mentioned that she was already worrying about that, but, was that too cruel? To use her fears against her? Maybe she should just sit down, talk with her and discuss everything out in the open. How would she explain it though? A gut feeling was not a good argument, the queen would never take her seriously. Daisy was so caught up in her thoughts that it wasn't until she was almost to the door of Rhaenys' bedchambers did she notice that there was somebody standing outside of it. She stopped dead in her tracks, a string of curses on the tip of her tongue. What are you doing here? She accused, eyes narrowed. Jorah Mormont looked at her with that same, sad expression that he'd had on his face since she first saw him. Queen Daenerys and Queen Rhaenys are inside. Daisy's eyes widened, alarm trickling through her. They are alone. Is Aegon in there with them? Jorah frowned. Aegon? No, he wasn't. Daisy made to step around him and open the door. All right, hold on, Daisy, he said, throwing up an arm. The queen does not wish to be disturbed. No offense to your queen, but I don't trust her to be alone with my queen. Daisy. Daisy, stop for a second. Huffing in annoyance, Daisy glared up at him. Sir Barristan told me what a capable fighter Queen Rhaenys is. She has nothing to fear from Queen Daenerys, trust me. Trust you. Daisy slowly raised an eyebrow, then purposefully stepped around him and knocked on the door. Your Grace. It's Daisy. Are you all right? Do you need anything? Daisy listened intently, her ear basically pressed to the door. She wasn't satisfied and didn't relax until she heard her queen's voice. It was muffled, but there was no panic or strain in her tone when she told Daisy she was just fine. Daisy crossed her arms, leaning back against the wall on the opposite side of Rhaenys' door. She completely ignored her cousin standing just a few feet from her, but almost immediately the silence was deep and deafening. She shifted from one leg to the other, adjusted her dress, did everything possible to ignore the anger coursing through her body. Unfortunately, the silence did not last long. Daisy, can we talk about this? That was all it took. Talk about what, Jorah? Daisy snapped, rounding on him with flashing green eyes. She did her best to keep her voice down so the two queens wouldn't hear, but it was very difficult to do. What would you like to talk about? The fact that you sold people into slavery in order to pay off your debts because of your bitch of a wife. The fact that you fled Bear Island rather than face the punishment for your crimes. The fact that you broke your father's heart, destroyed the Mormont reputation and left us to clean up your shit. Shame. Shame radiated from Jorah in waves, but that coupled with his sad blue only served to make her angrier. I'm sorry, Daisy. You have no idea how sorry I am and how much regret I have. I am not the one you have to apologize to, Jorah, Daisy retorted, shaking her head. Uncle Gia took the fucking